Hello and welcome everyone to the future of work and employee mental health, how changing work models actually impact well-being and what companies can do about it. So again, I am Renika Weston, the owner of Your Next Thought, and I'm excited to be with you today to talk about one of the things that is so important in the workforce, and that is mental health. And I'll be joined by my panelists. They should be coming in here soon. All right, coming to the stage. Yes. I always say that it's best for individuals to introduce themselves because although I've had the opportunity to interact with each of you, I know there is something special that you'd love to share with those that are joining us. So if we could start, I'll start at the bottom. We'll start with Jess. And then Jess, if you could just popcorn it to the next person. So tell us where in the world you are calling in from and what your background is as it relates to this topic and really why this is so important to you. So love to hear from you, Jess.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Goldberg. I'm a leadership communication expert and company trainer and executive coach. I also teach leadership and communication skills at Columbia University. And I'm really excited to speak about this topic, particularly. Mental health is something very near and dear to my heart. Also, prior to being a company trainer and being an executive coach, I also worked in the mental health space. So I worked at a company called 10% Happier. I worked at an AI robotics company where we were building a robot that taught social and emotional skills and helped children regulate their emotions. So I have a wide spanning background, but a lot of it has focused in on mental health and how do we help people feel their best, do their best. And now I transfer that into the workplace. How do we help people show up their best so that they can actually do their best work?
Nice. So next, let's go to Candace.
Hi, everyone. Candace Giesrecht, and I'm calling in from the area colonially known as Kelowna, British Columbia. It's the traditional unceded territory of the Okanagan Nation and Syilx people. I'm the Director of People, Culture, and Engagement with the Canadian Mental Health Association. And so I oversee both the HR team as well as the community engagement team. And the community engagement team is responsible for workplace wellness strategies, education. We just, in short, like to say connecting the cause to the community and the community to the cause. So very, very happy to be here and always love being a part of Hacking HR events.
This is such a special place. Candace and I go back. I think we have known each other in the virtual space now it's probably been 4 years.
I think it's at least 4 years. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Good to see you. Good to see you. All right, so I will go to the left of you, and is it mine? Am I saying that correctly? Money?
I was just writing you a message.
Oh, Mina. Oh, I love that. Mina, thank you. Love to hear from you, Mina. Where in the world are you calling us in from, Mina?
I'm calling in from Istanbul, Turkey. So it's almost the end of my day. Now it's 5 p.m. here. I am the founder of Happy Work Studio. I'm a fan of Hacking HR. I'm the chapter lead and I've been moderating a lot of events and panels. So I'm thrilled to be here as a panelist today. At Happy Work Studio, we are specifically focusing on creating happy culture in the companies. And we are working with the executives, leaders, and the HR representatives to create their value sets, change the behavior so everyone thrives. I'm also a happiness coach and the workplace happiness coach. We also certify people being happiness coaches and workplace happiness coaches. So this is something very dear to my heart and looking forward to kick off our conversation.
Yeah, I love that. Mina, would love to hear a little bit more about how one gets certified to be a happiness coach. So throughout our session today, I'll probably ask you a couple of questions about that to find out more about that. And then is it Shari or Cherie?
It is Shari. I always say it rhymes with Larry.
Hi,
everyone. Shari Chernak, typically based in Austin, but just actually wrapping up an HR retreat on the west coast of Florida. So today I could probably get certified as a happiness coach since I've had some time to take care of myself and meet others. I am Chief People Officer at Isaacson Miller. I'm also an executive coach, and mental health in the workplace and in general are topics near and dear to me. I've been a 10-year volunteer in suicide prevention and crisis intervention, taking the midnight shift. So really look forward to today's conversation. Have been on other Hacking HR panels and look forward to some really meaningful dialogue today.
Yeah, the midnight shift. Oh, there was a show years ago. It was called Midnight Court or something like that. Any of you, like no one smiled, so no one must be old enough to remember that or even to remember it in syndication. But oh man, we'll hear more about that as well. And last but not least, Sanim.
Hi everyone, this is Sinem. Today I'm actually originally Turkish as well, from Istanbul, but today I'm joining you from Barcelona, Spain, where I'm living currently. So I'm celebrating my 20th year in corporate world, started as a consultant, and the last 14 years of it has been focusing on digital transformation and HR. And for me, why this is really key today that we are discussing this topic in this panel is as both an employee, an employee, and a leader in a global company with a diverse team, a distributed team, and diverse team members. And in a VUCA environment that we all are in, right? Because this was discussed very much in detail yesterday in the summit. So the world is changing. We are constantly facing different kind of challenges and opportunities in this VUCA environment. So basically, for me, what is going to be key when we're going to discuss the future of work, I think is not going to be the skills or competencies, but the people, the employees. And that's why for me, I think I'm really keen on making sure well-being and mental health is prioritized in the workforce and in the companies that we work for. So looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you. I'll just kick it off with the first question, and anyone who wants to answer it. I'm just interested in, a lot of us talked about innovation and things that we're doing as it relates to HR and specifically around people. What are some of the emerging practices that you're probably most excited about in the workplace as it relates to mental health and well-being?
I can kick things off just to get things going. I mean, I think one of the things I'm most excited about is that, the significant shift we all were forced to look at. And I hate to bring up the pandemic, but it's a big piece of it. Like looking at the not confusing presence with productivity. And so the forced, look at what could be flexible or what might not be. And I mean, I think even while some people have been either forced back to the office or have chosen to go back to the office, some of those elements of just being okay with when people need something outside of what showing up and being in a chair and doing work on command in a certain spot. I'm excited about that shift that has happened, but also what that means as we look ahead.
Yeah, as you talk about people getting to the office, I no longer have a commute. I don't know what your commutes have been in your careers, but I had an hour-long commute. And there were times where I missed it because during that time I could catch up with folks. But I am here in the DC metro area, and the return to work has been a return to you-know-what. I mean, just trying to get in and out between Virginia and Maryland, anywhere between 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. is something else. So when you think about individuals' mental health, it's not just when they are in the office space, whether that be the space with everyone. It's not just the space that they have in their homes, but actually the commute to work. And we've got to be thinking about that for people as it relates to their mental health. Anyone else have any thoughts around the models that you see or the things that you see that that are impacting us?
I'll jump in with one analog change and one digital change, both of which I think are promising. The analog changes, companies are in many cases beginning to train their people managers on how to identify and be in that first line of response to indicators that somebody may not be thriving in the workplace. In my mental health volunteer work, as well as in many conversations with people, often when they reach out to someone, it can be the culmination of weeks or months of feeling a certain way. And so to the extent that it's possible to spot some of those signs sooner, to react, even just to react with warmth and understanding, and perhaps encouragement to tap into other resources that are available, that could really bring about a very different kind of experience and potentially outcome. And I would say the other thing that I'm excited about is I'm starting to see, these are obviously in various stages of development, but AI coaches for people, managers. We know that HR is overworked. There is not always enough time to provide individual coaching and role play and so forth to every single people manager. So just providing some nudges and guidance on how to respond to certain things that managers are observing or experiencing can lead to very different conversations. And those are also trained to say, that's actually a problem that you should not be trying to tackle on your own. This is a good time to reach out to HR, or this sounds like it's something that is even more significant than just a workplace issue, and you should treat it as such. So I think those are both encouraging in terms of how they can really change the course of an interaction or set of interactions with somebody who's struggling.
Yeah, I love that, Sherry.
I want to chime in because I'm also a remote work expert. I have been a thought leader in the remote workspace since 2012. So I have been experiencing this flow from when people didn't have any idea about how to do it to I want to do that. I think there's also a shift in the mindset of people because people change their priorities in their lives after the pandemic. They just prioritize their health, their well-being, their loved ones. And now that's why we are seeing that shift to spend more quality time at work and at their spare time. And AI, I think, is helping that. So AI is an enabler. So contrary to all those horror stories that people are foreseeing, I'm like, is it going to replace us? No, it's going to make us more valuable. So this is the change that I'm seeing. When I was at Transform conference, I was really happy to see that there were as many AI solutions and well-being solutions as there were AI solutions. So people now do care about the well-being of themselves and for the others too. And the companies realize that it is not something nice to have these well-being solutions or support for their employees, but it's a must-have because everyone's burned out because everything is so fast and we are not designed to be that fast. So, and there's so many the level of interactions, all the notifications, everything is happening so much in our world that we need to rely more on the well-being solutions, all that support that we can get from technology to augment it.
Yeah, I love that. I have one that we could use from a technological standpoint, but it's really basic because the question was really around emerging practices. But one of the practices that we don't use enough is asking someone, how are you really doing? Like if you ever had someone ask you that,
Exactly.
like they could sense either because of your body language or your energy, and they just double clicked and asked that question. And so when we think about all of these emerging practices, I also want us to not forget about some of the basic human elements that we have to teach the machines to be able to do, because the machine is actually probably intuitively not going to just double click on the same question. And when you ask that question again, it's not just asking it with the same tonality, but it could be leaning in, it could be giving more space. So again, thank you all for that one. Let's go to another one. From your experience, leading HR strategy and transformation, how have you seen the push for digital and skill transformation affect employee well-being? And I kind of talked about that just a moment. So someone sent that question in. So if you recognize that one, I want to hear from you.
I'm
Of
happy
course,
to
maybe.
I'll
Oh,
let you
sure. Go. Okay, sure. Thank you. So, I mean, when I look at it from an overall HR transformation and digital transformation perspective, whenever we say or initiate a transformation, especially when we are talking about skills focused transformation, we are talking about disturbance, of course. I mean, we are asking people to change their ways of working. We are asking them to adapt to new processes, new policies, and we are disrupting the way of working, literally. So in that sense, I don't think that it is, I mean, we have the luxury to underestimate that cognitive toll. I mean, that the disturbance that we are creating. That's why I'm always an advocate, and that's the approach that I will always bring into transformation activities, that we go with a human design, human-centered design. So, I mean, what does it mean, human-centered design? So that's basically involving the empathy, involving the employees in co-creation of the things that we are going to implement, right? Whether that's a system, whether that's a new tool or process. So we make sure that basically with this co-creation, we are able to test, we are able to pilot, so we are able to actually prototype things with the employees, which might enable them to feel more a part of it, so that it's like the transformation is not happening to them, but it's happening together with them. And I mean, why we are, by the way, discussing this, especially for skills, for me, that's also quite critical to highlight. I don't know if anyone had a chance to see the Future of Job report from the World Economic Forum. So basically, it is stating that 59% of the skills of the current workforce would need to be trained on the new skills or upskilled. So that's why I think we need to think about this transformation around the skills perspective and how we approach it from a mental health perspective. Mm-hmm. For me, basically, it is not, I apologize, just maybe one last sentence. So for me, it's not about, the mental health should not be taught after the transformation. It should be embedded in it, basically.
Yeah, love that. One of the things that you were talking, someone said strategy doesn't fail because of bad ideas. It fails when human capacity quietly hits its limit. Any digital transformation, while intending to improve performance, will inevitably have a dip in productivity until you inspire the people. And I think that's what you're talking about, is that, you know, we can't do this to the people. The people have to be involved in this. They have to understand, what are we trying to do? Why is this so important? And how do we exceed in this, or how do we succeed in this new environment? So Jess, love to hear from you on this one.
Well, I think she mostly covered the points that I was going to cover, but I can add a little bit more. So, you know, when we think about change and we think about trying to upskill people, a lot of things that happens are two big things. One is anxiety, and the second is change fatigue, especially when changes are coming quickly and they come again and again, that we can easily fatigue our employees. So the counter way of working with that is, one, building trust. And trust is built by that co-creation that she was mentioning. But how do we actually do the co-creation? Well, the co-creation is typically done by not having an AMA at the end, but at the very beginning. Because so many leaders will do, ask me anything, here's the new change that we're doing. And they're like, why am I getting resistance? And it's resistance because they didn't do the understanding at the very beginning. Because employees are far more likely to embrace a change if they feel like they were part of it, even if it goes in a different direction than they wanted it to. If they just felt like their voice got heard. And so typically the technique to use to do that is something I call a listening tour. And a listening tour just means that before you go and announce a new strategy, before you even really build it out, a new change that you might be doing in the organization, to understand what's going on the ground floor. Because as we get higher up in leadership, we know less about what's going on the ground floor. We may make assumptions about what might be going on. We may think that we remember what it was like for us when we were on the ground floor, but it's very different. And so we need to actually ask the questions, diagnose the right problems, understand the feelings, the viewpoints, let people feel heard, and then weave what they care about and what they're afraid of into how we are going to build out the new plan so that they feel supported. So one example of this is AI. A lot of companies I work with, their employees are very resistant to embracing AI. And it's because if you really talk to the employees, they are worried that once they embrace it, they're just going to be laid off and their positions are going to be eliminated because they will have trained up the AI that will now take over them. So if we want to have them not be resistant, what we have to do is we have to either A, as a company, commit to, hey, we're going to upskill them and keep those roles. Or B, you need to understand and listen and hear them out. You need to actually, if you want to keep those employees and you want to help embrace that new change, you have to hear them out and then build out systems so that they can feel safe doing it. And I really would encourage people to not use the word change, to not use the word new strategy, but to talk about it as though it's a conversation that's evolving naturally from what we were already doing. Because when people feel like it's something totally different, they're going to resist it. But when it feels like it's, oh, this is just a next natural right step, and it's communicated in that way, they're going to be far more likely to embrace it.
Yeah, just as you were talking about that, I want to make two correlations. So the thing that we're talking about today is these changing work models and how they impact employees' well-being. And so as you were talking, it made me think about Kotter's 8-step models for change. And for those of you who have sat through trainings and you've talked about it, it seems like a thing, right? It's just, you put this model together until you actually layer it on top of a real world situation. And so everything that you all have talked about today, we're actually taking a model for, and I'm going to use the word change, Jess, but we're taking a model for change and we're putting it on top of these models that are changing in the workplace. And one of the things that you all talked about is the hybrid work environment. That's a change for a lot of employees. They have not had that. One of the other things you talked about is really the change that is helping people become more efficient, using machine technology. I used Grammarly years ago. I started using Grammarly, and that's AI, right? But people don't think about it from that perspective. So again, thank you so much for sharing that. Mina, I've got one because I haven't heard from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts maybe on, let me see, I got a couple of questions here. When you think about actually, let's talk about mindsets, because there was something you said earlier that made me think about that. If you could offer one mindset shift or a practical step for organizations to better support employees' mental health in this evolving workspace, right, where people are having to come back to work or people working from home, all of these different models, what would that be? What would that one mindset shift be for organizations?
Flexibility would be on top of my list, and flexibility in all kinds. So people usually think about, we are now confining everything into the office. So like we say, okay, whatever is happening is back to the office. Whatever is happening is at the office or not. Like everything is revolving around this discussion about the office, that people are missing this very important point, that this is about flexibility. This is about how we do the work, not where we do it from. So flexibility is number one, because it's making you open to new things. It's making you flexible about the change. And as Jess was saying, people, when they hear the word change, they're kind of like, they're freaking out because they are tired of the change, because change is always challenging. And when you look at the change curve, it's the same as the mourning curve. So it's like, if you are in a shock, if you are mourning for something, it is the same, those are the same phases that you go through during a change. So if you teach people how to be adaptable, if you teach people how to be flexible, and I'm also working with AQAI, I strongly suggest that you check them out, as it assesses your adaptability quotient, just like EQ, IQ, AQ. So if you teach them how to be adaptable, how to be flexible, then no matter what the change is, they will be adapting to it. They will be, and I always resonate this to the surfing. So you need to see the waves before they come. So you need to just like, sense it before they come so that you can go further. And this all happens when you are adaptable, when you adapt to that change, when you adapt to it. Because like 10 years ago, it was the Kanban, it was the lean methodology. So everyone was talking about agile. And now we are talking about AI. And the next thing is going to be something else. It's never going to end. But the thing is, it's all about you, how you are making yourself available. Are you flexible enough so that you don't break, but you bend? And like we keep talking about resilience, but resilience is, I think, is also being miscommunicated. It's not like, you fall down, you get up, you fall down, you get up, but you get up in your best self. So you are not, because otherwise you get up and you're hurt and you try to recover at the same time. So it's not like that. It's just like, being flexible, bending all the time.
I love that. Flexibility for those of you that are listening, and the AQ, correct? Adaptability quotient. Love that.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Candace, what about you? Do you have a word or something that comes to mind, piece of advice you give organizations?
Well, I have, I think, a question. So a question came to my mind, and I'm wondering if I could just put it out to the panel as well. Renika, I'm not trying to hijack here, but
No.
just as you were talking, Mina, I was thinking about how difficult I see it being for sort of new leaders to figure out how to lead and manage a workforce that is not job ready. So there, in the old days, we used to remember the old days when we could hire someone with certain training and they would come ready to do the work that's in front of them for maybe a year or two. And we just had to sort of orient them to our workplace. But because of AI, because of, how fast the world is changing, the tech fatigue, the change fatigue, just the declines that we've seen in overall well-being, because of all these things, these poor young leaders, and I'm not a young leader, but I definitely see myself going, oh my gosh, like there's so many things coming at me as a leader to try and help my staff to be ready to do the work. And so I'm curious about, just to anybody out there, Renika, you too, like, how do you do this? How are you managing these challenges with the fact that our staff are not job ready often?
Go ahead.
I'm happy to jump in and take this one. So one of my main jobs is I run manager training programs, especially training up new leaders. And I go inside organizations and help them get their managers job ready, because many of them are not job ready either. And how do they work with employees who might not be job ready? So there's a couple different ways that I like to think about this. But one is we have to be adaptable on who the person is that our employee is and how we're going to work with them. So the adaptability works like this. If someone is more junior or less, they aren't job ready, they don't have the information, that is when we have to use a teaching approach. So we have to start to understand more of it. We might have to be a little bit more in the weeds as a leader. We might have to really think critically about, okay, how would I do this? We might have to work with them in tandem to figure out how the job gets done, because we're going to have a clear idea of what it needs to be, but maybe we don't even have the skills either because it's new. And so we're going to need to teach and work in tandem to figure it out. And that means you're going to work a little bit more closely. When you manage people who are more senior or who have been at the company for a while, they kind of know what they're doing. And even if you are a new manager, you need to approach them with more of a coaching approach. You're not going to tell them what to do. You're not going to do it with them. You're going to tell them the goal and they'll figure out the how. So when someone is newer, we need to teach and kind of do it with them. And when they're not job ready, and when they are job ready, but maybe they're stuck or they're not motivated, that's when we use the more coaching approach. And then when someone has been at the company for a long time, we've taught them, we've coached them, but they're not performing well, that's when we give feedback. And the problem is that a lot of new managers, when they get these people who are not job ready, they rush to giving feedback. And that just demotivates people because they're like, I don't know how to do the how. You're telling me the outcome isn't right, but I still don't know the how to get there. And so that is the approach of the 3 different ways that we should think about. Actually, I'll add a 4th, which is giving praise when people are doing well, no matter which one of the category it is, we need to give them praise. but it's kind of a 4-part framework that I have, that how do we work with these different situations? But
Yeah.
thank you for the question. I think that that's a really common one that comes up a lot.
Great question. My question, I guess that we'll piggyback on that, and then we'll come back to maybe one of the questions that you all presented, is thinking about those different individuals within an organization, thinking about their mental health. Is there a difference in how an employer, a leader, would approach individuals based upon that? So you got someone that's brand new, maybe the skill set isn't there. They're having some challenges. There's some anxiety there. There's some other challenges they may have. There may be someone that's more senior, and Jess said we take a coaching approach with that individual. So any thoughts around how you might approach different individuals from a tenure perspective, from a skill set perspective, as it relates to mental health, if you are a leader in the workplace?
I think there are a few things that are actually common to all levels. So one is to kind of lead the whole person. So, if somebody is new and they are struggling, if somebody is maybe feeling a little bit of burnout and they're not performing, can you get to what it is that can motivate them? So the more that you're able to lead the whole person, the more you can have an understanding of what motivates them, what might be going on, what obstacles they have. I think another one is to encourage, or not to encourage, but to make it okay for people to fail, to fail fast, or to have setbacks, and to acknowledge that those are human, because I think sometimes a kind of tendency to manage to perfectionism can create a little bit of a spiral. And then I would say the third is to encourage a learning mindset. So regardless of how junior or senior we are, there's always an opportunity for us to learn and grow and develop. So to see our work as an opportunity for us all to continue learning, to learn from setback, to embrace a learning approach if we're not job ready, and then to grow our skills and capabilities if we are, and we're either struggling or doing well and looking toward the next opportunity. And then I think there are some, there are some differences, of course, in, maybe the tool set that people will bring to their work. People who aren't job ready, who may be new to the workforce, they may also not, we talked about this a lot during the pandemic. They may not have the kind of workplace interaction skills that are necessary. What people often call the soft skills, but if you look at skill surveys, they're the ones that are going to be AI proof. AI cannot communicate in lieu of people. AI cannot bring together cross-functional teams in meaningful ways. So also coaching to the development of those skills, particularly for people who are new, but also for people who may be struggling with different aspects of just how to be a productive member of a workplace, can be incredibly valuable.
I love that. When we think about these, I'm no longer going to say changing work models. We'll call them emerging work models. So when we think about these emerging work models and we think about employee mental health, what I'm hearing a lot of you say is there needs to be support. What are your thoughts around helping individuals learn how to ask for that support? Because a lot of what we're talking about is what the employer should do. And I have a couple of final questions here, but how do we help train or help individuals learn how to ask for the support that they need? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I can jump a little bit, because the points that Shari made, I think are quite critical. And I will link to your question while adding a couple of points to there too. So I think the way that we can enable, it starts with a cultural shift. It starts from the leadership. It is what is important is that the learning culture that we are creating in the company. And for me, that learning culture needs to provide space for vulnerability, so that people should be feeling safe to say, I don't know this, Or, I mean, people should be able to fail and then come back, right? I mean, not directly resilience, but trying things and piloting this. For me, that's very critical. And in a learning process, when nothing is fit for all, I think it's also providing different sets of, or I mean, different mediums, approaches to learning initiatives as well. For me, I mean, that what is going to support that is asynchronous working, or I would say a little bit connected autonomy, that we would allow people, where we would find the balance when people, based on their own peak of performance or peak of focus moment, that they can work, and we can see that work asynchronously through the tools, I don't know, dashboards, I mean, it could be any kind of online report and so on. But what is really important is that we cultivate the culture in a way that can be customized, that we give people autonomy, that we trust them for being the expert that they are, while giving them the opportunities from a learning perspective to focus on skilling up, where we are treating this skills gap not as something to achieve, but more as an opportunity to develop, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. All right, looks like we've got 5 minutes. So I want to give everyone no more than a minute. But if you were to come in as a consultant and an organization said, we've got an issue, right? We've got these emerging work models. We've got folks that, have these long commutes because they got to come in the office. We've got individuals who are working from home and they seem to be always working. What piece of advice would you give those organizations if they were to ask you, how can we prevent this always on culture from eroding our boundaries or eroding employees' boundaries and improving employee mental health? Who wants to start?
Let me go.
Okay, Rena.
I always tell them to have an outcome-based structure where everyone knows their goals and they're very clear. It comes from and everyone knows how they contribute to the ultimate goal of this company. They are part of the strategy so that they have the ownership and the accountability, and they know when to deliver and what to deliver. And besides that, I mean, no one should care where they're working from, when they're working from, how much they're working for. So it's all about giving them that, the specific goals, being clear, and everyone being on the same page, having that transparency. If you provide that, then they can just they can do it as they wish.
Okay. All right. So giving employees the ability to work as they need to work, but ensuring that we're always aligned with that goal. That helps prevent that. All right. Who's next?
Clarity. So two words: clarity and transparency.
Clarity and transparency. All right. Who's next? We've got about 3 minutes. I want to hear from each consultant.
I can go fast. Figure out the mechanisms for good two-way feedback. So there has to be ways that feedback is happening well, and that everybody is on board with the fact that we do this. We talk to each other. We talk about what's going well, what isn't, but multiple mechanisms need to be in place in order to do that effectively.
Love that.
I'm happy to go next. So to lead by example, I saw somebody say this in the comments also, the way leaders behave, actually demonstrating things like taking PTO. There's this great feature in email, which means you don't have to send it at the time that you write it. You can wait until the next day. And then the other is naming the elephant in the room. So actually having a conversation with team members or with the whole organization if you're in a leadership role, with your function that you lead, and talking about how people are working and what they can do to de-stress and make the amount of time they work appropriate.
Love that. And you're right. We've had some great comments here in the chat. All right. We've got 2 more and we've got about 2 minutes. So what would you do? Tell us, consultant.
So I love what Sherry said, and I'm going to build on that. Leaders need to model the behaviors, but they also need to set the standard for what the culture should be and what it looks like. And they need to clearly communicate that. So what are the guardrails? If we have people who work at different hours, what are the guardrails of when they're allowed to be off and when they can, just turn off their email and not be on? So, especially it can be hard when we have, people at different time zones and their, messages are always coming in, even if it's not the time zone that someone else is working. We need to create guardrails and acceptability for when it's okay for people to not respond because they're not online, they're not at work, but they can also then respond later, and just creating a culture where that is okay and that is good, and having the leaders model that behavior, where if they're off on the weekend and it's not an urgent or emergency thing, that they're not sending Slack messages to their team members, and that's, an appropriate behavior.
Yeah. All right. Bring us home. What would you say?
I think I would just very quickly say humanize the transformation, put people in the center, and stop treating well-being and mental health as an additional goal to pursue or an objective or something that people volunteer to work on, but rather put it in the design itself.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I'm going to add mine. Most of us aren't ER docs. And so ER doctors are the only people who truly have to always be on. So if no one's coding, everything's going to be okay. And so we have to help employees to understand that, like, you don't have to be on all the time because likely no one's coding. And if no one is coding, we're going to be all right. So with that, ladies, I'd love to say thank you so much. You were wonderful as panelists. I hope I did you justice as the moderator. And it looks like we've got some great comments in the chat. So please go back and look at those. Connect with individuals on LinkedIn. Please stay connected with us through Hacking HR. We've got some great things coming up this month around well-being and mental health. Thank you so much. And you all have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are in the world. And welcome. I hope you've been enjoying the first day and the beginning of the second day of this set of panels, Workplace Wellbeing and Mental Health Summit. I am your host and moderator for this panel, Lauren Lefkowitz. I'm an executive coach and fractional chief HR officer. And I work with people on boundaries and burnout, which includes mindfulness and beyond. And so this topic, Beyond Mindfulness, Evidence-Based Strategies for Mental Wellness at Work, Exploring Tools that Improve Focus, Resilience, and Emotional Regulation, is right up my alley. I'd love to welcome our panelists to the stage. And we'll get into introductions. But as everybody is coming into the room, I'd love to welcome our audience to comment as we're going. Ask your questions, leave your thoughts. We would love for this to be a fully interactive discussion. So let's just go in a circle, starting with Kim and until we come back around to me, and do some introductions. Tell us who you are, what kind of work you do, where in the world you are, and why this topic is interesting to you.
Yeah, hi, good morning or afternoon, evening, wherever everyone is. My name is Kim Lee. I head the People Operations team at Wellness Together. The topic, I'm in Sacramento, California area, and the topic is, it plays right into the organization that I work for, but also it's a passion of mine just across the board, creating healthy, safe workplaces so people can thrive.
Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Srirang. I work as a head HR and strategy for JSM Consulting. It's a minority women-owned enterprise. I live and work in New Jersey, and very happy to be part of this very interesting topic, something that is really the core of the global environment that we are part of. So thank you very much. Look forward to chatting with all of you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Megan Brown Enya, and I am the founder and head coach for a company called ADHD at Work, where I provide one-on-one and group coaching for women with ADHD, along with some HR consulting to help businesses and other organizations create inclusive environments for the neurodiverse staff. And so I am very excited about this topic for a lot of reasons, but one mainly so that organizations and individuals can understand the impact that organizations have on their employees' mental health, and to be able to provide some insights and some supports on how to do that for the neurodiverse community in particular.
Good morning, everybody. I am Felicia Westberg. I'm a global HR executive with various roles across the HR organization. I'm calling in or participating today in Hillsdale, New Jersey. So it's finally a sunny day in New Jersey. So excited about that. And this is a topic that's near and dear to me because at one point my daughter was experiencing some challenges with, how she was feeling every day. So this is something that I feel like the workplace has a significant impact on mental health. So I'm excited to be here with my fellow panelists. Thanks for joining everyone across the world, I guess.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, good evening. I am Carla Martins, and I'm very excited to be here today in this panel. I am a human resources director and also leadership coach, and I have 25 years experience now. Oh my God. I've noticed over the years an amazing change in terms of how organizations deal with mental health and mental wellness. So it's a passion of mine as well. And I'm looking forward to share my experiences and also to learn from everyone. Thank you for joining.
We have an amazing panel and great energy. Panelists, I'd love to ask you to just stay on mute if you're not speaking so that we can reduce any echoing, and then pay attention to each other's mute buttons. There's no particular order we're going to go in, but when you're being called to answer a question, just pop on and we'll make it work. So our first question today is going to be, the thing I think that comes to HR people's minds very often is, oh, great, another thing for me to be in charge of and try to run, right? And so if we're thinking about going beyond mindfulness, and a distinction there, if you can include that, like what do you consider mindfulness versus the elevation to like a full mental health picture, as you're answering a question that I'm asking in the longest way I've ever asked a question in my whole life. So what role does HR play? And then also, what role does all of leadership play in normalizing, even having conversations about mental health in the workplace?
I'll start, if that's okay, Lauren. I actually have a pretty simple answer for how leadership can normalize the conversation, and it's as simple as just asking people how they're doing, what are some of their challenges, and how you can support them as a leader. I think those are they're very, very powerful questions that that initiate the conversation, and that's really the first step. I think for HR, there's a lot of things that HR can do. Of course, there's their benefit programs, marketing what's available to within their benefit programs, but more importantly, having programs that are whether it's an allyship or a mentorship, I think are real key elements of normalizing the conversation. So I welcome others to chime in.
Hi, I fully agree, Felicia, with that. And also, I believe that as leaders and HR professionals, we need to also lead with vulnerability and show that it's okay as well, that we too have these same feelings and it's a safe space.
Just wanted to add one other thing, if that's okay. And this may sound harsh, but I also think that it's, as a manager or leader, it's your responsibility to understand that you have an impact on your employees' mental health, and that's something to take seriously. And so that's whether or not you're doing some additional education and some research, that's having explicit in conversations about that, but making sure that you're providing yourself or asking for the necessary tools to help better understand how you are impacting your employees' mental health, and then understanding the signs when things are going left.
Yeah, great points. Just adding a few more to it. One thing I feel is that mental health should not be considered as a stigma. It should not be considered as a burden. It should be considered as a part of your 8-10 hours of work life that we spend at the workplaces. So as at the leadership level, they should focus it as a true mindful program. So we have been speaking about money making, which is of course the for profit organizations, and we also talk about meaningful workplaces. The third point that we are discussing today should actually become part and parcel of the day-to-day work life is mindfulness. So yeah, I believe taking out that stigma part, that I have a mental health problem, or I have some mental issue. The culture has to be open-ended to accept that we have that issue and this can be addressed. So yeah, thank you.
Can I just add to conclude? Great points from everyone. As HR leaders and the leaders of the leaders of the organization as well, it's really important to create the space as well and all the resources for everyone being able to have that support and being able to either mindfulness or mental health programs, both the space and the resources as well.
I love hearing all of the positivity about creating opportunity, creating the conversation. Sometimes at a wellness conference, you hear a lot of gung-ho, yeah, let's do it. And we don't walk away with the practical application. So let's really talk about what are some practical ways that either the company you work for or companies you've worked with, if you do consulting or coaching, have implemented well-being and mental health specific programming and support. What are some real things that you've seen done or that you've done that have worked?
I can jump in. So one of the things that I've seen work really well, and in my current organization, is the flexibility. It's in terms of flexible working. And we might not associate this immediately to mental health and wellness, but really supported the team. So it's giving the team the trust to manage their workloads and the time during the day so they can balance their work as well as their personal life. It's limiting, for example, overtime and allow everyone to work during working hours whenever possible, ideal always. It's encouraging the time off, really using the vacation annual leave. And also in our organization, we implemented what we call mental wellness day. So every quarter, there's one day that it's dedicated to mental wellness. So there are no emails, no phone calls from work. People are really encouraged to take the time off for them, and the leaders role model those behaviors. So that has really worked for us as a team in terms of trust, empowerment, and mental health as well.
Yeah, Carla, that's great. I'll just add to that because I've seen wellness days. Wellness days are very, very well received from employees. So I think that is something that an employer can do, and adding it to your payroll or holiday calendars, whatever you are publishing, so that the advance notice also helps people plan not only their work week but what they're going to do on wellness days. I've also seen early releases before holidays, which tend to be a very, very stressful time of year. Again, that advance notice that we're leaving early, we're leaving early before Thanksgiving or whatever the upcoming holiday is, have been very simple strategies that an employer can do. We also have to infuse a little bit of fun into the workday. And I think we don't give fun enough credit in the workplace. So there's some easy things that you can do to really engage your employees just to step away for 20 minutes. I mean, at my last organization, we played Family Feud, and it was 20 minutes like once a week, and it was so much fun, and nobody thought about work. So it's those infusing a little bit of fun into your workplace can also be something that is very inexpensive to do for an organization.
I have a couple of examples, different workplaces. So where I'm at currently, we have, I send out a weekly email to remind everyone to take their breaks. And not only just a reminder, but I have tried to find very creative ways for people to spend, specifically not thinking about work for those 10 minutes. So things like doodling. There's a website that it do nothing for 2 minutes, and if you move your mouse or anything, it starts over. So trying to get people to be mindful and present, and giving some tips and tricks. It's actually been really fun to research myself on these to keep things interesting and new. The other thing is where I worked previously at a software company, very high pace and demanding environment. We went to an unlimited time off policy, discretionary time off, and well received at first. And then of course the reality is it doesn't really change whether how people feel about taking time off. So we in recognition of that, we gave there was 2 weeks throughout the year that we just shut down and really pushed. We made sure managers understood that this was a shutdown period, so that we ensured that people were taking some time. We also offered wellness days and employee, appreciation days and things like that, where we would shut down. And again, the intent was to shut down. And putting our time zones, because I've worked for a number of global companies. So, you've got people from South Africa to India to UK and across the US. And so putting your time zone so people understand kind of the time that you're working and able to respond, and when your off time is.
There was 2 things that I wanted to add. So one is for organizations to really think and consider and better understand how their space is impacting their employees. And so if you do have people in there, being really intentional about structural and design, I mean, everything from colors to lighting. and seating arrangements, etc. That's one thing. But then the other thing is what I also see that really helps employees is actually providing them coaching. And so whether or not that coaching is coming from their direct manager and their manager actually knows how to coach, and or if it's coming from an employee assistant program that they already are purchasing, and making sure that that content is accessible and provided directly to individuals, and then or actually allowing coaching to be a part of their accommodations, and so being able to access coaching as an accommodation. And so a lot of employees are struggling with communication or emotional regulation challenges, but they really need a safe space to be able to communicate what they need to communicate and to get it out without fear of losing their job. And so it's being able to work through the challenges that they're stuck in without having to be careful about what it is that you say, just in case it goes through up the chain, and then now you're going to get fired based on what happens within this conversation. And so knowing that you can access supports and seek help without fear and judgment is extremely helpful. And I've also seen companies also have social workers on staff, or just having a department where their employees can go and have private conversations with mental health professionals that are already on staff.
Yeah, some real great points already discussed. I'll talk specific to my organization, what we are doing. And it's pretty close to all of us, is we don't do micro monitoring, we don't do micromanaging. So people are not managed or looked upon in terms of the minute by minute basis what they are doing. So that kind of gives you a lot of freedom to be creative, to manage your own time. So that's one good thing that has worked for us. With the previous organizations that I work with, the Wellness Friday is something that I think Carla already spoke about. That has worked really well, especially during the summer, starting now from May till about September. One more also activity that we did with one of our previous organizations is donating our personal time off. So there are people who are in need of personal emergencies, medical emergencies. They consume all of their paid vacations for the year, and they may have to pay off for their bills. They might want to continue their paychecks, and it came out as a very great way that people could donate their paid time off to people in need. That was another thing. And like Megan said, just to add to it, the corporate social responsibility is also something that people find very engaging, meaningful and mindful. So there is a purpose attached to it. So that is something that probably could be a great way to achieve this cause. Thank you.
Srirang, when you were talking about micromanaging and minute by minute, I had a flashback to like 20 years ago in my career of a boss who would surprise pop by your office or cubicle and say, "What you working on?" Put his elbow up on the cubicle wall. And it was jarring to feel like you were getting caught even when you were working. So yeah, that's you're all bringing up great points. And Megan, your reference to psychological safety has brought up some comments in our comment section about what to do when you're not in a psychologically safe environment. And so what have you seen work with organizations who have gone from, as somebody said in the comment section, leave your personal issues at the door, and we've shifted as a society to like, well, I'm the same person I am at home as I am at work. How can you create a psychologically safe environment for employees?
I can start. Megan, if you wanted to go ahead. I'm just kind of going back to it's creating the culture and leading by example. And understanding and communicating and making sure that people feel as though they are included, and how people want to be included, and so you have that psychologically safe environment, as Megan was mentioning. You make sure that people fail fast, and we have a coaching conversation, that it's not you're going to get in trouble, we're not micromanaging. We all work and perform in different ways. Our top performers could be a creative space. They need some other flexibility. There's other things that they need, and understanding that you're managing situationally to who you work with. Some people need a lot of autonomy. A lot of people, some other people, maybe a different part in their career, need a little more reassurance. But trying to make sure that you bend to that as a leader and as a culture, and for a company, admitting that we're not going to always get this right, but we're going to fix it. We're going to move forward, onward and upward kind of mentality.
You had mentioned something around like the idea or the concept of you are one person at work and then you're another person at home. And so in certain contexts that may be true, but in other contexts it is definitely not. And so like if you're experiencing emotional dysregulation in the home and you're not addressing and putting in strategies in there, then when you get to work, it's probably going to show up just in a different way, right? And so there's aspects of how you function, how your brain works that are going to show up in the same places. They may present differently, but it's still going to show up. And so I think we need to move away from this whole concept and idea of that you're one person here and another person there. And then if you are doing that, like, we call that masking. And we also understand that like masking has a drastic impact on your mental health, because you're not able to be your authentic self, and you're causing more burnout and putting more stress on yourself, right? While you're doing that. And so I would be careful with, if you find yourself in a place where you are trying to be one person in one place and then trying to be another person in another place, that's a point where you should really start to reflect.
Yeah, Megan, I think that's a great point. I think many of us want to hide who we really are, but bringing that authentic self into work every day is so critical. I would also ask organizations to think about who they're hiring during the hiring process, because I have to be honest, Lauren, I joined a little early and I think I read a comment from the prior session. So apologies if I bring it into this one, but it's hiring humble leaders. And when you hire a humble leader, they're genuinely kind. They're supportive of employees. And I think it almost starts with the hiring process. So I think for me, being in TA, being in talent acquisition for several years, that's a critical component that I think falls by the wayside very often for companies.
Can I also add, in terms of psychological safety, the key is the leadership, and leadership needs to give the example. I've been in organizations where there was a lot of conversation around psychological safety, but then it wasn't real. It was just conversation, because from the leaders, and one specific leader or the other, they weren't creating the environment where psychological safety exists. And even as in HR roles, sometimes there isn't much we can do if a CEO, for example, doesn't promote or champion the psychological safety. And I've seen examples where the culture only changed when there was, for example, a transition of CEO and the recruitment of a new person, as Felicia just said. So it depends. And also, if we are in an organization, and I've been there myself, where there wasn't psychological safety or there wasn't care about their people, my decision was to move. And sometimes it might be the right choice as well for us as individuals.
Carly, you mentioned something that kind of sat with me. A recent previous organization I worked for, we had a big push for psychological safety, and we had surveys, and we really went all in on trying to address it. However, we had leadership that didn't have emotional intelligence, so they were a mouthpiece for it. They said this is important, but their own actions did not speak to that. And so being C-level, how they respond, treat, it just, that comes down. So no matter what, if we're trying to say as a culture, as leaders, this is it, but our executive leadership are not behaving that way because they're just not emotionally aware. They're not self-aware. of how they're impacting others, that just rolls downhill. So no matter what effort you're trying to do, grassroots, ground up, however you want to look at it, it's it's not effective if it's not from the top as well.
And Felicia, you made a really good point in terms about the hiring process that I just wanted to kind of go back to for a little bit, because one of my pet peeves with organizations and hiring, right? It's the position description, like the position description and the interview process, or what the application looks like. That already is setting the tone of what it is that you're going to be dealing with the organization. So if you're reading content within that position to job description, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of red flags, right? And so when thinking about how your mental health is going to be impacted, and then noticing and understanding what those red flags are, but from the organizational standpoint, like, don't put them in there in the first place. And so, I mean, I appreciate the honesty that recognizing that your organization is chaotic, but let's make it less chaotic before we start hiring people, or to figure out how to do that effectively. But you can see a lot of red flags even within the position description before you even apply about what it is that you could potentially be dealing with when you get to the organization. And that will definitely impact your mental health.
I think the hiring process in general is a whole new hacking HR topic.
It is.
Just to summarize, we had some very wonderful comments out here. When we talk of psychological safe, I feel that, it's a topic that talks about not being threatened to express or speak up, right? So creating an environment, it not only starts at the leadership level, it has to go down to the grassroots level. And no matter how much the leadership speaks and walk the way, I feel generally the managers could be the first line responders unless they are not trained people down the below, because that's the major chain of organization which sits from manager to a junior level to a manager level. So unless these guys are trained to understand what is psychology, what is psychological safe environment, and they do the same thing in their day-to-day work life, that probably will bring up a lot of people to create a culture where they can feel they want to express, they want to talk about it. Otherwise it's purely leader is doing a job at the top, but down the line people are not really trained well enough to understand what exactly is psychological safety. Thank you.
I love this conversation. I could talk about just psychological safety at work all day. When we come to talk to our leadership about this, about well-being and mental health, sometimes we have some old school thinking that is like, well, what's this going to get me? How's this going to benefit me? How's this going to benefit the company? So when you think about measuring effectiveness, when you think about the metrics that your leadership team might ask for, what are some metrics that we can talk about? What are some measures that we can, if not quantify, qualify, so that our leadership is willing to listen?
Business impact, financial impact. What is this doing? How, looking at the team's engagement surveys, engagement scores are kind of a lagging indicator. But if you're looking at top performing teams versus teams that may be struggling, in the microclimates of the, at work, turnover and the impact of those things. And you can put a lot of very qualitative data behind it to show happy employees are engaged employees are wanting to go further and do as much as they can, and those that are burnt out, those that don't feel connected to the mission, don't feel connected, they don't understand the impact of their role or even have role clarity, that's where the burnout happens, is they don't really see the point in what they're doing. So I think that being able to take those factors and show the how that can impact the business and the goals.
Yeah, I agree. I think engagement surveys, quarterly pulse surveys are a key metric to be looking at. And if possible, I think there was a comment earlier about the differences between male and female employees and how they respond differently to well-being or mental health. And so if you're able to slice your data by gender type, I think that is another data point that you can look at. And then of course, having communication questions on your engagement surveys are good, because then you know whether or not you're engaged in transparent conversation. And that linkage to mission and vision is so critical for employees. So, having your leaders speak at town halls, I think are just, and how people are rating town halls. I think these are just some little metrics that you can be looking at throughout the course of the year against your larger data set.
Yeah, I have a example of what we worked in one of our previous organizations. So um, this became a reverse flow, I would say, maybe an unfortunate strategy. But looking at the exit interviews, where in one of the organizations, people were leaving because of a toxic manager or a manager who was not understanding. And the point that I was driving before, that as first responder, if the manager is not trained well, they could be the reason why people want to leave the organizations, right? And then when a survey was taken with the exit interviews, we found out that the main issue lied with the managers not having an understanding of the workplace, and they themselves need a bit of a training. So that exit interview became a theme for starting something called as coffee sessions, or like one-to-one meetings, where people got an opportunity to talk to the HR once in 2 months or once in 3 months to share their feelings, their expressions, their opinions about not just their managers, but what's going on in the organization and how it is affecting them mentally or personally. And those sessions basically became a culture, and then that reflected into the employee turnover. The employee turnover drastically reduced, and that, of course, as we all know, it impacts the business outcomes. But yeah, I felt that was some positive point that we had driven in one of my previous organizations.
Just to speak to leaders and managers specifically, and if you are in a position where you feel like you need to get all of this organizational data before you take action, I would ask yourself, do you actually have the information already, without now tasking somebody else to do all of this deeper dive data? Because people are probably talking to you. Like, this isn't if you get to the point where you're now asking for a deeper level of data from your HR employees, like this, you probably already have something to start with, because this isn't the first time that you heard that there potentially is a challenge that's happening, especially when it comes to the mental health of your employees, right? Like, people are hearing this information constantly. And so it's like, let's not disregard the anecdotal data that you are getting on the daily basis and pretend like it's not important. And so if you're hearing this information on the regular basis, yes, is it important to get these other numbers and the quantitative data? Yes, but you also have some qualitative data that you probably are getting access to on the regular basis, and that's also important.
Thank you so much. So next question, I'm going to ask us to share our own experiences a little bit, be willing to get a little bit vulnerable here. Tell us about a situation where you didn't pay attention to your own physical, mental wellness needs. And either you got caught or you got called out, or you were really negatively impacted. And what did you learn from that?
I can start with an example that happened to me personally during COVID, when we all of us transitioned to a remote working model during a couple of months, in our case, years, and we continue. And at the beginning, it seemed that working remotely would be easier and better for my mental health and mental wellness, but it was completely the opposite. Being seated in a computer the full day, I totally forgot to have break times. I just started and sit it early morning in my laptop, and I would stay up night, and sometimes I would go to dinner, and then I would just check up my laptop, emails, let's see if something has come up, because it was so close to my personal life. And I was called out actually by my CEO at the time, saying, "You can't do this. You can't be sending emails at this time. You can't be reading emails and replying. It's not good for you." And I actually started then, once he called my attention, to notice my physical well-being, mental well-being, my harmony between personal life and work was really bad. And I had to create a few boundaries to myself, in terms of, if you look at my diary now, I have time blocked after, for example, 5:30 p.m. in the afternoon. It's completely blocked. There's no meetings, there's no work. I just blocked it. I have focused times during the week where I just have focused work, read some emails. As an organization, we also agreed 15 minutes between meetings. Otherwise, we would be in back-to-back meetings the full day. So these new ways of working really affected me, and I didn't even notice until someone called my attention, and I had to change my way of working completely. So it was a really call out that even us that try to support others as HR leaders, we can fall in the same trap very easily.
I had an experience several years back. I was working, again, tech company. It was private equity held. We were acquiring companies left, right, and center. And so I would, take time off, but I was working through my time off. I was working through holidays. I was working through weekends. Two people called me out. One was my husband. We were traveling, and I got up early and was, checking stuff on my computer. And he's like, "Please just stop." The other was my team. They said, "How is it that they can feel comfortable taking time off when I don't take time off and I'm not being a good role model?" And that is when those two moments, I realized that the impact wasn't, I wasn't doing, I wasn't getting so much done that it was worth the impact to my team, and it was worth, of course, my relationship. So those were two moments that, I got called out, and I had to make an adjustment, which was for the best.
Yeah, I think we've all gotten called out at one point in our career, right? I think for me, it's that emotional regulation component of mindfulness. And I'm Italian, so I use my hands a lot. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm too passionate. So for me, it became, how do I practice self-awareness each and every day? And I do that at work and at home. So I think that's helped me a little bit ensure that I kind of balance my emotions, because I know sometimes it might be perceived negatively by whoever my audience might be. So for me, that's something that I've been practicing, and I'm still practicing it. So definitely doesn't happen overnight.
I would say for me, it was the turning point was getting a diagnosis with ADHD, right? And so being in an office and recognizing the signs of being burnt out, like I'm sitting in my car for 20 minutes before I even walk into the office, dreading it, right? And so recognizing that that's a sign, but then learning and having a deeper understanding of why that was happening, and recognizing that my weaker executive functions were not being accommodated in my workspace. And so being able to, one, have a diagnosis, one, recognize the signs, and also accept that this is how my brain works, and that there are strategies that I can put in place to help alleviate the stress that I was experiencing because I was in that space. And so knowing that I have ADHD, and also like recognizing too, like women get diagnosed later in life in general, because we're usually, like, especially if you're a high functioning and you have mastered how to mask, within the workspace. And so now knowing what the strategies are that are going to work for me and implementing them has been a game changer. And so, recognizing that, 70% of the workforce is neurodiverse, and understanding that, understanding that there are more neurodiverse people within your work environment than non, and then building strategies and putting in tools in place to normalize difference and making things more inclusive was really helpful for me.
I would say this happens to me every day, to be very honest. So, like Felicia says, it's a everyday thing that you have to practice. I do meditation every day, evening at a set time. I practice a form of meditation, but to be to be very honest, this happens to me every day. Dropping kids to school, packing their lunch bags, going to office, going through the chaos of traffic. Um, all those things, it happens to us every day. It's a part and parcel of our life. What we take out of it and try and do it on a day-to-day basis, meditation I found really good. It helps me to wind up my day beautifully and maybe start the next day a little more energetically, but I would say it happens every day.
Panelists, thank you so much. This has been such a rich conversation, and I feel like every question could have been a whole hour of conversation. I also have been called out for not paying attention to my own mental health while gushing over others, right? And being the caretaker. So I heard many of you say practice. It's a practice. And one of the best things I've ever heard, one of the best quotes I ever heard was, "It's a practice, not a perfect." And it was directed at me. And so be in practice. Ask your peers for help. Build community. Connect with people on LinkedIn who you're meeting at these panels, who you're seeing in the comment section, who resonate with you. You get to pay attention to your own mental health and well-being as well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of the summit.
happy Mental Health Awareness Month to all the awesome people connecting around the globe. You know, I've heard someone saying that the most powerful missions in the world, the rockets, the supercomputers, electric cars, all need the basics to function, which is the energy, rest, and recalibration. And yet, we are trying to overperform those missions without sleep, without sitting for hours, skipping our meals, and wondering why we still feel that burnout. The truth we all know and yet agree to sink in is our body is our original technology, and when you fuel it right through movement, sleep, and nourishment, it doesn't just work better, it also feels better. And you know, when you feel better, you lead better, and when you lead better, you connect and live better. And I think the motto of everyone living today is to have a better life. So that's exactly what today's panel is about. And I couldn't be more excited to be a part of it because this one is personal and a powerful topic. And I hope it's exactly the reset we all need. I'm Sneha, Chief Event Strategist at Hacking HR, and I'll be moderating this amazing panel today. And we will be diving into the role of physical health in mental well being and how these little things of movement, sleep, and nutrition impact workforce performance. And before we dive in, let's make this a two-way street. So here's a question for everyone, for the audience and the panelists. And what's one thing you do to stay grounded, especially on your tough days? It could be just a walk, deep breaths, a stretch break, a smoothie, or even a 10 minutes of silence. For me, it's always playing with my cats. So drop your answers in the chat. We would love to hear them and maybe even try them ourselves sometime. And just a quick reminder before we go in, this summit is credit eligible through SHRM, HRCI, and IHRAM. And to receive your 11.25 credit digital certification and Credly badge, make sure that you have an account in the Hacking HR lab, and the codes will be available just after the later of the week. And now I would love to welcome our phenomenal panelists, Dwayne, Olina, Malvika, Gemma, and Daniel. And please, panelists, introduce yourself. I'd love for you to share who you are, what you do, and please do start with one thing that you personally do to recharge when the day feels heavy. Let our audience know what's that special thing our panelists do. And we could start with Dwayne.
Well, for me, I guess it's just moving. You know, it's just getting out from your chair and walking around and maybe going outside and just really getting some fresh air, right? I also have cats, but when I'm in the office, it's hard sometimes to bring the cats with you. So for me, it's really just being aware that I'm not 100% with it in terms of my mental energy and just getting up and moving around and maybe walking up some steps, get my heart rate up a little bit, and that kind of gives me some energy for the rest of the day.
Who'd like to go next?
I'm happy to go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Malvika. I'm the founder of Apvis Group, which is a human capital advisory firm driven by the core belief that to win in the marketplace, businesses must first win in the workplace. And one practice that I have is going outside. Like Wayne, I go for a walk every day, typically at least a 3-mile walk, sometimes a 4-mile walk or longer, as much as my schedule allows. And the other thing I do is when I'm stressed or overwhelmed, I just take a break from all the screens and I go and make myself a nice cup of tea and just treat it as a ritual and just sit down, do some breath work, and just take a breather for myself.
Awesome.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Elena, and I'm the Chief People and Culture Officer at New Energy Nexus, which is a green energy NGO. I'm also a coach, and I'm graduating from my master's in psychology in a month. I think my background can add a bit of insights into why it's important to take care about our physical health. And to answer the question, how I recharge, well, another cat person here, so I do play with my cats, and I work from home, so it's more available to me than for Wayne. But when the day is especially hard, what I've learned quite recently is to actually listen to my body and to ask myself what it needs right now, right? So, for example, I run most of the days in the mornings, but sometimes I feel that that is not what my body wants or needs, and it asks for some yoga or for some slow movement. And I think it's really important to not always push yourself for like records or achievements, like staying on track. You know how it feels sometimes. You don't want to break the streak, but it is important to listen. Otherwise, you can also kind of end up overtraining or doing too much of something and neglect some other sides of yourself.
I can go next. My name is Danielle Lewis. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer at Pacific Pilotage Authority. I'm really happy to be here this morning. I would say on tough days when I'm feeling quite stressed, you know, I mainly work in the office. I work a little bit from home. But luckily we're by a beautiful seawall by the ocean. So I'll often take a walk on a nice day by the ocean, step away from my phone for about half an hour. And if that fails, if I'm in back-to-back meetings, often I'll do a walking meeting or ask if someone can go out off-site for coffee, which I think helps me be more present anyway, because I'm taking a break from my computer and moving away from the noise of the day.
Thank you. Amazing.
And so I'm Gemma Norris. I'm a bodywork therapist, and everything about the body is what I would advise to be. So like you mentioned, Alina, is actually connecting into the body and understanding what it needs, because sometimes it needs exercise, sometimes it needs rest. And I do this technique where I lie on the floor and put my hands underneath my head and just do like a vagus nerve activation. And I'll either fall asleep because I need rest, or I'll feel more energized and I want to then go and exercise. It's really quite a good way of understanding, has there too much cortisol in my body that I need to rest, or do I need to move that cortisol through? So that's really a good technique, as well as the classic, the breath work, just taking space, moving, going into nature. There's multiple meditations, EFT I bring in. So it's really about tuning in and what feels right. And I think that's really important to be able to listen to your body, because ultimately through that, you will understand what's right for you. That's really key.
That's totally true. I love that. And I see someone popping in the comments specifying that they love spending the time to relax by playing Pokemon. So that's another way of walking and having it fun. So I did that too. So yeah, it's just a nostalgic feel. Love it. And let's get a bit deeper with a few reflections with your unique journeys. I would start with Alina. Can you share a personal story of how lifestyle changes with these little things of movement, sleep, and nutrition, and how it impacted your own mental health and well-being on work performance?
Yeah, sure. And I'd like to start with the fact that I'm based in Kyiv, in Ukraine, and that alone probably tells a lot about how important the mental health is, and how physical health is a part of that as well. Because some days you just wake up and you start the day with finding out if everyone is okay, were they able to sleep, or they spend the night in the shelter. And sometimes we do spend nights in the shelter with no hours of sleep at all. And you need to adjust, right? You cannot expect people to be fully functional. Even in most cases, they actually are. They've learned the resilience to continue and to carry on with their days no matter what. But of course, over time, it drains you, and it takes a lot from how you feel, and the stress builds up. So it's really important to think about those strategies. And as I mentioned, I started running recently, but it wasn't my first time to try to get into that habit. I tried several times before, and it never worked. So what I decided to do differently this time is actually what I recommend all my clients to do, right? Is to start from very tiny steps. I set myself to run for 5 minutes. I actually felt stupid sometimes because it takes longer to change into your running shoes and to kind of do all of the preparation. But I intentionally stopped myself after 5 minutes, even if I felt that I could go longer, just so that I could build the habits and I don't wear myself out too fast. And I also decided that I will be adding like around 2 minutes every week, so that I could build it up and eventually get into the habit of running. And I'm happy to report that it's been like around 4 or 5 months now, and I'm running for 30 minutes almost every day. And this is the longest I've been doing that. And what I've also noticed is, if you read maybe Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit, he actually mentions there that there are some habits that act as an anchor habit, where you build one and the rest positive changes just tag along, and they start to happen naturally. And it happened for me. For example, I started to wake up earlier just on my own. It wasn't a goal. And this is also something that I struggled with. I feel way more energized. I have better clarity. I'm less stressed. And I've noticed that I'm in better mood most of the days as well. So I think those are like, if you identify one of the habits that can change it for you and that can become this anchor habit, then it's way easier to change the rest. For example, it also impacted my nutrition. No specific goals in there, but I've noticed that I don't crave sugar as much as I used to. I'm just not thinking about that as often as before. So, and of course, it impacted the productivity, just the clarity of my mind and being in a better mood and being able to support others. I think it's important that you need to be stable yourself, because otherwise you're not in the position to provide support to other people as well.
I agree. Yeah, that's huge fitness goals, and also I think it's worth giving a try. Love it. And our next question goes to Gemma. So, what brought you to recognize the body's intelligence, and how can we learn to master our health through the heart mind body connection, just like you do?
Oh yeah, that's a brilliant question. It's my journey. It's been like 16 years as being a health therapist with hands-on, and through sports massage, through to energy and fascia, and it's been a real lesson of listening to the body and knowing that it has this innate wisdom to show you where to heal. And I liken it sometimes to the old vinyl, where there's a scratch and it can't quite get past that scratch, but with the assistance, you can smooth that scratch and enable the body to come back to its flow and its coherence, which is where the importance of the mind-heart coherence comes in. This is what brings the body to its natural rhythm and flow, because when we're in stress, we're discoherence, we're all over the place. So when we regulate our breath with our heartbeat and allow our mind to become curious rather than the dictator, we start to sort of drop deeper into our bodies and to understand ourselves. We create space through that. So we start to see, why do I think and why do I feel the way I do? And so our bodies become this this innate wisdom that guides us into in life, whether it's in our health, within relationships, with work. Really, it's this huge tool that we have forgotten, and it's about remembering.
Awesome. That's amazing to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we have Wayne. So, my question is, with the background as a CHRO and the HR coach, how have you seen physical health especially movement and the recovery, impact your leadership effectiveness and with the team dynamics?
Yeah, I guess I have a unique perspective. Been in HR for many years, but about 5, 6 years ago, I decided to become a fitness trainer. So I got my certification through the American Council on Exercise. And to me, it's the perfect blend of exercise, physical fitness leads to business fitness. I've always found that the most effective leaders seem to find time for fitness, exercise. One of my mentors, she was a big Pilates person, but she traveled all the time, but she never went without doing Pilates at least several times a week. So I think that discipline, that rigor around exercise translates into more confidence, more rigor around business. And so I don't have any scientific proof, but it's more anecdotal. But I've always felt that those who are committed to exercise in one area of their lives can commit to other things in terms of business. So I think that's the connection I've seen. Most of us, a lot of us are deconditioned. That's the challenge that we have, right? And a lot of things happen when you're deconditioned. You don't feel good, you get sick, you don't have energy. And so that's why I think it's important for organizations to not look at movement as something extra. We're going to go to the gym extra time or after work. It should be really inculcated inside the strategy because I think it aligns. I think, if you can have a more physically fit workforce, you're going to have more productivity. People are going to feel better, they're more engaged. So I think the big issue is how can we create movement in an organization that's not something else, but part of the way we do work. And that's been something I've been focusing on.
Thank you, Wayne. That's amazing. Before we jump on to the next one, here's answering one of the question our audience has asked. So the book that Alina has referred to is The Power of Habits, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, jumping on to the next one, we have Daniel as a CHRO. How has physical health influenced your own leadership growth and clarity through your career?
So I went through a profound shift in my health about 6 or 7 years ago. At the time, in retrospect, I realized I was a complete workaholic and had no work-life balance. And it was really focused on moving up in my career. I would be in the office till 7, 8 at night, trying to accomplish things and taking on too much. And I went through a bit of a wake-up call about 6 or 7 years ago. I went to see a doctor and the results really weren't great. I was pretty young, but had high blood pressure. My anxiety levels were through the roof. And it really caused a wake-up call that I thought, I really have a moment here that I can choose how I age. And, I really need to make an intentional shift in my life. So, and it was a slow start to go from nothing to being really committed to physical activity, but I really did commit to it and grew to love it. And what I noticed is once I started committing to exercise and breath work and, as my physical health improved, I found there was also a profound shift in how I viewed myself at work, how I related to others. And I found, just accomplishing a goal I didn't think I was capable of accomplishing created a lot of confidence for me. So I found that my career really took off at the same time. And it's funny because prior to that, I was someone who wouldn't take a lunch break, would work through, would stay late in the office. And as soon as I started to carve out boundaries for myself and really commit, not let myself down and put myself and my health first, I found, it actually, as opposed to being detrimental to what I was achieving, it actually drove a lot of my success. And I found that confidence, carry through to boardroom meetings and, just being more in tune with my body made me feel a lot more confidence during presentations. And as a result, I really found around the same time as part of this journey, I started to get promoted into executive level positions. So for me, it was a profound shift in not only my physical health, but really how I viewed myself and, how confident I was taking up space in a room. And I found that it really did also have a profound shift in my work performance, my career.
Thank you so much. That's so important and powerful. Thank you for sharing. And lastly, our amazing Malvika. As a founder, how do you personally stay intentional about maintaining your physical health while leading and building something impactful that you're doing right now?
Absolutely. I prioritize my physical health the same way I would prioritize a business objective. And I do that by scheduling it. We schedule meetings, we schedule time to work on projects. And for me, that means also scheduling time for yourself. So, like I mentioned earlier, I go on a long walk almost every single day, on average, probably 6 days a week. And it's a non-negotiable for me. So regardless of what's going on in my day, I need that walk to kind of reset, to process what happened throughout the day, to be with my husband, screen free, check in with him, ask him about his day. And I find that ritual helps me tremendously. But beyond the basics, I've also learned over time to self-reflect and ask myself, am I energized or am I drained? And if I'm consistently feeling drained, I know it's time to take a step back and reassess, because building something impactful is a marathon, not a sprint, right? And careers are long. We're most of us are going to work 50, 60 years probably. And so, we're no longer in the era where people are retiring at the age of 50. And so we need to keep that in mind. And taking care of my physical health means that I have the energy and the resilience to lead others as well. And I've stopped thinking that I need to earn the rest. Earlier in my career, like Danielle, I was a workaholic, and I had this mindset that once I'm starting to feel overwhelmed and stressed and extremely tired, extreme exhaustion, that is when I will rest. But I've started to understand that, in fact, I need to preemptively rest and allow myself that luxury of rest to prevent the sense of overwhelm and burnout.
We all resonate with that, and yes, these are the little things that makes huge difference in life. And yes, with that, we've covered our personal questions to each one of you, and let's open it up to everyone. And here's my first topic that I would like to bring upon to the stage is, what are some practical strategies companies can adopt to better support employee physical well-being, especially in the high stress or hybrid work environments? And audience are also open to add up your thoughts in the chat box.
Well, I
I'm
think.
happy
Go
to
ahead.
get us started here. One of the things that I would recommend leaders and organizations pay attention to is, what kind of diet are you encouraging your people to have? I cannot tell you how many offices I walk through, mostly in the US, I guess North America, that serve donuts and pastries for breakfast and pizza for lunch. And then they take people out for a happy hour where they're serving them alcohol. And I'm not saying you should stop living your life and not eat what gives you joy, but we need to think about, would we be serving those things to our children or a child in your life you care about over and over every single day? Would you be serving them pizza and donuts every day and highly processed foods every day? And when we start to shift our mindset toward the mind-body connection, which I think Gemma talked about earlier, and when we start to understand that what we put in our bodies gives us the energy to live a full life, to perform at work, right? A great diet also makes sure that you have the energy, the sharpness, the mental alertness to do great work. When you start to understand that, then you start to realize what a disservice we're doing to our employees across the board by serving them these foods day in and day out.
Yeah, I would add that I think there's a couple things. It's more of a mindset, than we think of exercise and movement as kind of a perk, but really it's a productivity tool. And the first thing we have to do is think differently about it, that it's a critical tool that we can use to make our workforce more important. Designing workflows, start of the day, you meet outside or you take a walk somewhere, or, people like meeting outside when the weather's warm because it gives them, they're moving around, they're doing things. People like going to training programs, workshops, offsites, because you're moving, you're building things, doing things. And so I think when we move, we feel better about ourselves. We have some energy around that, and it's actually more fun. I think it's a leadership that has to demonstrate, has to showcase that they have to kind of walk the talk around that. They have to commit, as I mentioned, leaders I've known, committed to exercise all the time. And so when you have that kind of environment, it allows other people to kind of take the lead on that also. Again, I firmly believe that movement and physical fitness are related to business results, in terms of decisions, in terms of reduced absenteeism, efficiency. And so the key is to make movement the norm, not the exception. Get people moving, create spaces where people can move around. We make fun about high-tech startup companies. They have ping pong tables and pool tables. Well, there's a reason for that, because people like moving around. They like playing. And so movement can be playful. So those are some of the ideas I have around that.
Yeah, I would add to that especially if we're talking about the hybrids and a lot of remote settings, it's really important to be flexible and to lead with empathy, and to actually acknowledge that people might have different needs, and they might want to schedule their days differently. We're not all set to be productive in the mornings or to exercise in the mornings. And of course, there should be healthy limits, but in the same time, having the flexibility and allowing people to schedule their days in a more kind of in a way that fits them better, I think is really important. But at the same time, what I've noticed recently, like after we had the pandemics and people were not seeing each other, I think on one hand there is a shift of getting back to the office, but there is also a wish to do that, right? To connect with people, and people started to value offline more than they used to value it. At least that's what I'm noticing. And I think some of the initiatives, they don't necessarily need to come from the company as a body, or like HR or leadership. It's really great when you can give people the opportunity to create some initiatives on their own. For example, I know companies where people gathered and formed a running club, and a lot of people started joining that, right? But it was a self-organized group of people who did it. And I know that there are different activities like that. But also companies, of course, can contribute to that and offer some support, like from gym memberships, but also to some activities in the office directly. I've been doing yoga for around 15 years. And the reason I've got into yoga was because 15 years ago, we had yoga at the office during the lunch break. I don't think I would ever have gotten into that if it wasn't just there available, so easy to attend, right? So I think like the easiness of access is really, really important. I know myself, if I need to travel to a gym for an hour, I would never do that, right? So, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people won't as well, or they would do for the first month, and then the life would just happen. So making it more like accessible and easy to get into that. And again, we're not always talking about some very lengthy or expensive programs. You don't need to exercise for hours really, but taking breaks, maybe for leaders to lead with that example, right? To show that this is important and to prioritize it. I think that is something that could help to, as Wayne said, this is a mindset. And if we want this mindset shift, then we need to start introducing maybe small changes on different levels so that more people get engaged and take the lead on that. So it's not just one department or one leader who's pushing the initiative.
So I'd like to add, from my perspective, it's really about everything that other people have just said as well is really important. But it's about really taking responsibility for yourself and for your health, and for businesses to bring a culture that encourages that, to bring in conscious conversations, to bring in people that can share different insights, because how I talk might not necessarily resonate with somebody else. So it's about bringing in different voices and opportunities to listen, to understand that there's different choices that you can make about your health, and responsibility is like a really key. And it can often feel like responsibility feels really heavy, which then takes us down the burnout, overwhelm, anxiety. But also responsibility is about the ability to respond. So it's about giving you the sovereignty and that independence. So the more that we can encourage people to understand themselves on a deeper level, to improve their emotional intelligence of why they think and feel in the way they do, this really enables people to start taking more ownership of their life, of their health, relationships and work. So everything's intertwined. So from my perspective, it's about how you can encourage through the culture to encourage that kind of taking responsibility and understanding yourself on a deeper level.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you need some incentives in the workplace. So just a tip here that I give my exercise clients, get a book, an ebook or something that you won't read unless you're at the gym. And that will force you to go there, especially if you like the book. And so it's a little tool. And the same thing in a workplace. I've seen people have walking clubs at lunchtime, uh, healthy food, things like that. Use creativity. Ask your employees. You're not going to have all the answers. See what they think. Have them come up with their own designs around this. What can we do to encourage people? Because some people, are not going to be motivated. You can't force anyone. You can only provide some tools and resources and let them figure it out. And a lot of people think, exercise at gym, I'm sweating, but just taking a walk up a flight of stairs. When you come in the morning, instead of taking the elevator, take the stairs. Those are all little tips that we could do. Maybe have a contest, who's not using the elevator, who's walking, you have the biggest loser kind of things, which, is good and bad with that. But there's different incentives and contests that can really motivate people. So you be creative about it. I ask your people. I really think that many organizations could do a better job in this area.
I've actually seen a company who did the competition. They've used an app that was built in their country, so it's probably not available worldwide, but it's probably not as hard to do, where they've split people into teams. And for a month, they competed for who walks the most steps as a team. So there is this component of not letting your team down, and they've done it in spring when the weather is nice and people are more likely to go for a walk. So I would really second what Wayne is saying. And I like the idea of pairing with something pleasurable. If you don't consider exercise pleasurable in the beginning, which for many people is the case, I think listening, I know a lot of people for whom time for when they go for a run or when they walk is the only time when they actually can listen to a book or podcast or something, and that becomes that sacred time. For me, it's that is the time when I watch a series, and this is a deal that I've made with myself. If I want to kind of waste sometimes watching something not educational but just to relax, then okay, welcome on the treadmill, and I'm looking forward to those times now.
Thank you all. Those are amazing points that you've touched based. And I think this panel is running as we are getting there at the time. And I have one more question that I would like to ask as people all from the leadership level. So how do you make the case of investing in employee physical health at the leadership level you are? Let's go with a quick round of answers.
I think for me personally, if it's really important to make sure anything's is supported by data and metrics. So we do ensure that our benefits program is comprehensive, like it has naturopath benefits, mental health benefits. We allow people to claim personal training. But what we do is we do pulse surveys to support it and have a wellness component of all of our engagement surveys. And also for our employee and family assistance programs and benefits providers, we ask for stats and I report to the board on all of that. So, and I do tie usage of benefits to, performance metrics over time to make the case for it. And I think, the cost of absenteeism, if you can demonstrate that, and long-term disability are, anyway, they are so costly as an employer that it's very easy to make the case for physical health benefits.
I think those are really important points. I 100% agree with everything that Danielle just said. So, for example, on the absenteeism point, one study found that wellness programs reduce absenteeism by 14 to 19%. Other studies have found over the years that for every dollar invested in wellness programs, companies see an ROI of $3 or higher. So I think you have to bring in the data, but also bring in the storytelling along with the data. So sharing what your employees are feeling and how your employees are feeling, what's top of mind for them, what are they struggling with, not just engagement survey and sentiment analysis data, but also what are you hearing in stay interviews, what are you hearing in focus groups, in AMAs, and bringing all of that together to support your business case tells a well-rounded story. And we know that employees, healthy employees are more focused, more productive, and they directly impact business outcomes. So connecting these well-being measures to business outcomes, I find helps convince leaders even better, and come in with some members of your coalition already. So master the art of the meeting before the meeting, talk to some individual key executives and get them on board before you go to a big executive offsite or a big executive meeting and present your case for investing in well-being.
I think one of the options that because like most leaders look at the outcomes, right? And money spent and return on investment and things like that. So maybe starting with something that doesn't really need that much of investment, but start tracking the outcomes and show that some of the initiatives that are focused on promoting the physical well-being can actually promote performance and productivity as well. For example, if there is a self-organized running club, it doesn't really need much of investment, if any at all. Maybe at some point you'll create t-shirts, I don't know, but ultimately you don't even need to do that. But I would also want to touch on another topic that's been raised in the comments, that some of those physical activities can exclude people who cannot participate with limited mobility, for example. And I think this is really important, that it doesn't become a kind of race or a competition, right, to do more. But it's really like the healthy lifestyle and physical well-being. It's not really just about sports. And it's about those small things that everyone can do to become a little bit more healthier. And it would be different for each and every one of us, because I'm sure there are some athletes for whom my 30-minute runs are just nothing, right, or a baby step. But for some people, like going out and taking 10 minutes walk would be already a huge deal if they have kids, for example, and they cannot carve this time out of their schedules. So I think it's really important to think about how you can include but not exclude people, and a lot of those things are really about educating how certain habits or certain behaviors impacts our lifestyle, our happiness. It's not just about productivity and work, right? It's all very, very connected. I believe that we actually become more productive and efficient because we're becoming happier and less stressed, not the other way around. Which is probably debatable. I don't have hard data on that. That's just my feel on that. So kind of providing people opportunities and options to choose what they can do, what tiny small step they can take today or tomorrow to shift their lifestyle towards a healthier one, is what we could potentially focus our attention on as leaders and as HR professionals.
Just to follow up on Suzette's question, which Alina just responded to, we in HR tend to kind of, one size fits all. And if we've learned anything, it's really we need a lot size of one. And so someone who's in a wheelchair is going to have a different perspective on physical fitness or movement than someone else. But again, I would let them co-create something. Have the people who are less mobile brainstorm ways that they can be more active. And how can a company support that? Co-creation, I think, is the only way to go nowadays. We in HR do not have all the answers, but by spreading the idea generation around to other people, we could generate some things. But again, it's important to not think that one size fits all, especially when it comes to movement, but to get input and make it flexible and customizable to the individual.
I'd love to just add to this. It's really everything that just supporting what everyone said. And I feel for me, it's about really giving people the choices and giving them the array of spectrum of what they can do and what resonates with them, like whether it's exercise, the moderation of exercise, but really having conscious choice of what we're eating. For instance, a lot of this topic is about movement, sleep, and nutrition. If we're not eating well, if we're eating things with glyphosate on it, that's blocking our serotonin levels, which basically is a neuroendocrine, which affects our whole body. This is when we're struggling with mental health issues and with poor sleep and our body's not repairing. So I think it's really about giving a suite of knowledge and wisdom that people can resonate with and that what feels right for them, and making those steps achievable as well, because I think overwhelm can just be additive overwhelm when you just think you've got those loads to be done. All of a sudden your self-care becomes the to-do list, and that becomes overwhelming. So it's really about just creating space for people and making it very simple initially. But like I said, what I've created is a platform. It's about trying to give people choices. And then when you know you've got choices, you feel more empowered, you feel more hopeful. And I think ultimately that's what you're seeking, to try to empower your employees to feel that way.
Thank you, Gemma. And I wish we do have more time to take in, but we are at time. So let's wrap with the final reflection. So panelists and audience, if you could offer one piece of advice or motivation to employers, managers, or your co-colleagues, or to the co-panelists, what would that be? Please drop it in the chat from our LinkedIn Live. And if you ask me, my motivation is, if I really made it through the mental breakdown that so many of us would have also experienced during our COVID lockdown and its aftermath, I can get through anything. So that's my motivation. And this panel is absolute gold. To all the amazing panelists, thank you so much for showing up and opening up with honesty and heart. I love this panel. And to everyone in the audience, you're the reason we do this. And thank you for being here and for taking care of yourself and for being open to growing up with us. And see you all in the next session. Please stick around. again. Amazing to see you all. I'm here moderating another panel. And I would start by saying something that I've heard very often. You know, that the feeling when your laptop has 34 tabs open, 5 apps running in the background, and it starts freezing up. And well, that's our brain on a digital overload and today's world with hybrid work, constant pings, and back to back Zooms, and of course, AI tools trying to help us. At every turn, our minds are running at full capacity without hitting a pause. So that's why I love this next panel because it's about reclaiming space in your mind, in our day to day life, and our work life. So I'm Sneha, head of events at Hacking HR. I'm so much excited to be moderating this amazing panel about technology and mental health, the impact of AI, digital overload, and hybrid work on psychological well-being. And audience, just letting you know again that this summit is credit eligible, and to receive your SHRM, HRCI, and IHREM credits, and Credly badge, just make sure that you have your Hacking HR lab account and you receive this a week later under the learnings. Audience, just to keep it both the ways, please let us know in the chat what's one thing you do to disconnect from digital noise. If it's just the aeroplane mode, or a no screen Sunday, or one sacred hour with your dog, or just journal. Mine is always spending good quality time with my kittens and my cat. I love it. Getting on to the panel, I would love to introduce our amazing speakers of this panel. We have Garrison, Jeff, Soundry, Sean. I would love for you to introduce yourself. Just let our audience know who you are, what you do, and where you come from, and what's one boundary or ritual you have created to protect your own mental space or your own bubble in this AI tech heavy life. Who would like to go first?
I can kick us off. I'm Sharon. I'm a VP of People and Operations. One boundary that I have set is actually having laptop free weekends, that I work Monday to Friday. I still may check in on my phone. It's still connected, but I try to stay off my laptop doing heavy work on a weekend.
Hi, I'll jump in next. Jeff Luttrell. I'm the Director of People and Culture for TBS, a small manufacturing company in Western North Carolina. And I schedule time on my calendar at the end of the day that I can go away to the gym, even if that means I have to log back in later to work some more. But I block that time out specifically for me to do my workouts at the gym.
Hi, my name is Garrison Gibbons. I run people and administration at Choning & Co. Holdings, which is a fintech company. And my ritual is that I have a 30-minute mental health block right after lunch or in the afternoon, where I step outside of the office or I try to leave my house. So I leave my physical workspace during that time. I can use it for a variety of different things, but I use that as an opportunity just to step away from the computer and from my phone to kind of stop work for at least 30 minutes during the workday.
Hi, lovely to hear from everyone and about what you do. So making some notes there, mental and physical. I'm Soundri. I'm based out of Hong Kong. So I'm doing just what technically you shouldn't be doing. It's like 12:20 almost in the morning here in Hong Kong. So I will ensure the one thing that I'll do is definitely sleep in a bit more tomorrow morning for sure. I run a people's consultancy around helping leaders and teams drive business outcomes using storytelling as a way to get it done, build their personal brand. And I just really think that the stories I listened to listen to a bit of the last panel. The stories that they shared about their experiences were really enriching, and I think they have the power to change the world. For me, in terms of boundaries, I do pottery. So that's my go to as and when I can. But every morning starts with actually reading a newspaper. Brace yourself, not the digital one, with a cup of coffee. And I will wake up half an hour early to just get that me time for myself with the physical paper.
That's very important. Okay, and as looking at this amazing panelists, everyone coming from the senior level leadership team, so we would love to know from your role, how do you see AI and digital overload affect psychological well-being in today's workplace? And from your own lens, with a honest opinion, what are the pros and cons of hybrid work as it relates to your team, your employee mental health, and what do you see from it?
I'll take the hybrid work as a jumping off point. So my company started hybrid work in 2021. So the summer of 2021, so quite early in bringing people back into the office 3 days a week. And so we have set days Monday through Wednesday. So we don't really do a rolling calendar. It's not really flexible. It's probably a little bit more firm when it comes to a hybrid work model. I mean, we've had to be very intentional about the people that we hire who want that, particularly like on the tech side, right, where they can get remote first if they really want that from a interaction perspective. I think over as time has evolved, it's actually gotten quite easier because many people do or have commented that they would like some return to work. And so I think from a talent acquisition perspective, it's become easier to acquire that as people are then joining with more intention of how to leverage that time in office, fostering connection, using more in-person meetings versus Zoom fatigue. And so I think some of the positives include that, right? Collaborating is much easier in person, or people tend to like that human connection more when it comes to brainstorming, whiteboarding, anything that requires a lot of in-person collaboration. Debating and brainstorming like go-to-market strategies and projects. I think people tend to really like that in person. And I think just generally like being around other people and kind of from an energy perspective, people feel more energy when they come into an office. That being said, and then obviously the downside includes like when you actually then have work to do, or when in a remote world where you can kind of design your day a little bit more intentionally, both from a personal, but also from like an actual work perspective, that becomes much more challenging in a hybrid model because you have a project that's due on Monday night, yet you're in the office, you're being distracted by people, you're being pulled into in-person meetings and more ad hoc meetings, and you're unable to actually get like that project done, which I think causes kind of what Sharon was talking about like not working on the weekends. It causes kind of this natural kind of rolling it all over of, oh, I'll do this tonight and then I'll come in later tomorrow, and then kind of never really addressing like the core issue, which is how to manage your time and how to make sure that your time's not being taken advantage of by the office or by the commute or things of that nature. And so I think that's really the hard part, is I think time management and feeling like there actually is a beginning and an end and that you're on top of your work, as I think remote work tends to result in a lot more flexibility or kind of feeling more ownership of your output. So I would say that's kind of an immediate kind of pro and con that I think a lot of our employees kind of voice and try to work on resolutions for.
Definitely, as a solopreneur, I miss that buzz at the workplace, that connection. So you need to find your ways of creating the water cooler moments or the coffee, sneak in a coffee and all that. And I think for me, where the overload is, and which I see in my work with organizations, is the typical standard one on there's the real work that people do, the task and the outcomes that people need to drive. And then there's the work around the work, which is all the emails and meetings and everything else. Sort of necessary, debatably, but they do consume a lot of our time. And then there is that whole performance of work, as it's called. The behavioral scientist, Bridget, she talked about this, which is like sending late night emails or Slack messages, or showing up online early, starting late, and all of those kind of things. And I've seen that a lot of the leaders sometimes showcase some of these works because they are working in a different kind of a cycle and they've sent out the message. And even if they say that, oh, I'm working from a different time zone, please feel free to respond when you can, coming from a leader, something like this signals something very different. So I think a lot of the thing on the digital overload for people is not just on the real work, which is full by itself, but it's on the work around the work, which is all those extra meetings. Should this meeting have been an email kind of places? And of course, seeing a lot of people performing work. And so, oh, this seems to be the culture of this place. People seem to be staying late without knowing that maybe they actually took a break in between and went for a walk, or went to the school for a performance, went to walk the dog or something. But you're seeing that they stay late. And that signals something about a culture. And some of these things create the overload side. On the positive side is, of course, the whole connectedness that you feel when you are in a workplace, when you have your team meetings, when you go out for your coffees, huddles, the drinks, and things like that. And I think that's where managing personally and for organization to set some boundaries to manage that comes into place.
And I'll tackle the AI aspect because I think there are some positives and negatives as it relates to psychological well-being. I think for me, we're in a less populated part of our country, and access to care has been difficult. So AI has enabled us to provide more care for our employees and give them more options so that they can get the care they need when they need it, as opposed to working with our insurance company to find someone that can fit them in when they have an emergency need. So that's been a huge plus for us, is opening up the availability of lots of different providers around the globe that can help when they need it. I think there are lots of AI tools out there now that analyze your employees' speech and can tell you if maybe they're experiencing burnout. And that's something we haven't deployed yet, but we're looking into, because I think it can be hugely successful for us to figure out before they even know they need help what we can offer and how we could intervene. We work with a lot of people with disabilities in our company, about 75% of our population. And so, they've got a lot happening externally that impacts their mental health, and then add in technology and AI. And so it makes it a little more difficult. We've also found that our employees love the anonymity of using an AI tool for mental health counseling support. They feel like they don't have to tell somebody in the organization that they're working with, somebody that will keep it more confidential. Now, on the negative side, I think it just adds more digital time to the person, right? So that we're recommending, even if they might be overloaded, that it could possibly overload someone even more if we're saying, hey, we've got this digital tool available. And so we are seeing a little bit of that, and we've put a couple remedies in place. Privacy concerns are another issue that we've heard from some of our employees. Kind of the flip side of that anonymity, concerned about where that goes. If they're using an AI tool, who has it, who keeps it, and just wanting to ensure that that's kept confidential. And of course, bias in the algorithms may direct you down a wrong path, or offer care for somebody that may not really may not personalize it enough for them. So those are just a couple. So I think AI can be super helpful in some situations, and there are concerns on the other hand too.
I'll add to what Jeff talked about with AI. I think it's creating a lot of job insecurity right now for people, because they're thinking, if some of my tasks are automated, will I lose my job to AI? Will I be replaced? And so I think there's kind of that fine line of, how do you make this technology work for you? Could it make you more efficient, where you can get to do some more meaningful work? Are there opportunities for you to pick up other things that are more of a value add, if there's some things that you can automate in your role? But I know that creates additional stressors for people. Another area creating additional stress is there's more surveillance, there's productivity monitoring. People are not sure, am I being watched all this time? I get to work in this hybrid environment, but is someone actually like worried when I'm away for an hour doing my grocery run or going to the gym, even though I'm coming back at night and I'm signing back on and I'm catching up on my tasks? So I think that's also causing burnout and additional stress for people. There's the stimulation from the digital overload of all of the context switching. So I think there's all these pros and there's all these cons, and it's really up to us of how we balance both the negative and the positive to make the technology work in our favor, and balance those things out. I think with remote work as well, there's people that really love the autonomy and feel like they're more productive, and others feel like I'm isolated, I'm alone, I need that connection. And so it's really figuring out what works for you and personalizing that experience and looking for those opportunities that speak to your strengths in the environment that you seek.
Yeah, as it relates to, I think, the digital overload piece, it may feel counterintuitive to solve digital overload in part by more digital usage, but I do think that there is a way that AI can solve digital overload. For example, the last thing I want to do at the end of the day is create a job description. I don't think there's any use case of writing a job description completely from scratch when the previous ways that we wrote a job description was to go on LinkedIn, find 5 similar jobs, and then we manually ourselves copy and pasted parts of the job to make a amalgamash of a new job description. Now AI can produce that in less than a minute, and then you can tweak it and edit it. And so I think like with first drafts and early processes and policies and a lot of things that may have taken a lot of time to get from like version A to version B, we now can speed that up. That does solve some digital overload where the last thing you want to do is open up a blank Word document and draft from scratch something that AI could produce for you in the span of seconds. And so I think there is a way in which AI can be leveraged as a way to address some of that digital overload. That being said, I think obviously to Sharon's point, there is a concern around kind of job security and safety. And I think the best way to address that with employees is to have them try it, use it, leverage it, understand how it works, understand what parts of your job it can automate and what parts it can't. I think the kind of being scared and not understanding the ways in which it will eventually be leveraged in your space is not necessarily, I think, leaning into the future and how you can evolve your role to be more tangible. Humans do offer things that AI will never be able to offer. It's about understanding what those differences are. And I think if you just look back to the HR space specifically, people that didn't lean into a human first, more people oriented, less compliance driven, and more business oriented HR function are no longer in HR or are not doing it well. People that understood 10 years ago that this is where the industry was moving are the people that are now having jobs, having a space within the industry, and are moving companies forward. Same thing with like the Me Too movement, same thing with DEI, like people who saw the forefront of that and were able to lean in on it exceeded far better than the people who were hesitant to jump in and concerned about the ramifications and didn't do anything about it. And so I would say, I think understanding AI and how it will work within your space, what parts of your job it will automate, what parts of your job it can help with, I think will also help kind of relieve some of that anxiety. But I do think there are ways in which to leverage AI to address digital overload. Then you have to address the other aspects, which are hybrid work, meetings, all these other things that also add to digital overload. But I think a lot of it is less Slacks and meetings, and it is actual like the tangible work that also requires cloud-based technology and work in and around your computer and phone. I think those are the areas where AI could potentially be helpful.
Thank you, Garrison. This is the hard truth, and I'm so happy that you're all addressing it, and it's turning out to be an amazing discussion. And with that, let's jump on to that next topic, which is how has return to office, whether the full-time or hybrid, impacted your mental health well-being across different teams that you're handling, and have you noticed any generational patterns in how AI and these digital tools affect workplace stress or your mental load?
I'll tackle that first and then happily share with my panelists. So return to office has created additional stressors in my environment. And it's really just a matter of making sure that you're communicating the why. That helps ease a little bit of it if you're open about the why, encouraging more collaboration, that face-to-face in certain environments does help. And then also being flexible enough to understand that there are some roles that return to office may not be a mandatory requirement. We saw workers that the resistance created stressors. And until we closed the loop on the why we wanted them to be there, they talked about commute burnout because they were used to working from home. They thought they were successful. And then they added in all these other things. I've got to commute to work now. That added 30, 45 minutes to my day. So just, again, external things that combined with the space that we're in makes it even more complicated. The positive side to that is people do recognize that the collaboration and the new office culture post-pandemic has really changed the dynamics in the office, especially for us. We're seeing a lot more emotional intelligence with people working closely together, a lot more partnerships and crossing those silos. We were very siloed before the pandemic, and now being face-to-face again has helped people really figure out, hey, other people in other areas can really impact my work. Their input matters. And we're starting to see a whole lot more collaboration coming out of all that. So that would be what I would walk away with it. Generational differences, we are also seeing, we've got a big cross-section, younger and older. And I think younger workers, and I don't want to generalize, but generally speaking, younger workers embrace AI technology, are more open about their mental health wellness. Older workers tend to be a little bit more reserved about sharing those types of things, at least from our perspective. And we have to make sure that we've got things in place to help them and are available to them visibly, frequently, so that they know it's there if they're not as willing to share. And then, of course, older workers, sometimes tech-related stress. New technology might cause some concern or trepidation for someone if they're trying to figure out how to navigate it. I love Garrison. I think fully embracing the new technology will help them be much more valuable in the future. So trying to coach and teach them that, hey, don't be scared. Let's figure out a way to make it work for you, has been hugely successful for us.
I would say on generational, in terms of hybrid work as well, I do think older generations that worked for much longer in an office 5 days a week enjoy the flexibility. And I think see this as a, return to form of, I used to go in 5 days a week. I can now go in much more flexibly. I now have more freedom. And I think generally see hybrid work a lot more positively than I think potentially some of the younger generations who either started work just before COVID and then went remote and then realized that so much of the job could be done remotely, or who graduated college remotely and then have never really returned to an office or are returning to an office and have never socialized in this kind of way. And I think we really have to hold space for the particularly Gen Z and younger who are really going to, I think, struggle from a social interaction perspective, but as well as I think they will blossom when it comes to the technology and AI in the future because they've grown up with a device on their hand their entire life, and they kind of know the future of technology and they believe in it. But I think they struggle with the socialization. I see that with my own generation who grew up and socialized, but then also I think with Gen Z, there's a lot of internal struggles, I think, when it comes to being in front of an office, being kind of forced to socialize in a dynamic where they feel much more comfortable, I think, on Zoom or via Slack or communicating textually, which they do, every day in and out with everyone in their lives. And so I think that's the one where I think getting back to Jeff's point about value, I think we really have to start being intentional about the value that an office provides to Gen Z specifically, because they will make the argument quite effectively that they can get the same communication done textually and remotely and via Zoom, that in-person connection for them is not meaningful. And it actually could be detrimental because it's a challenge for them. And so I think figuring out ways in which to leverage that and understand that and hold space for them and figure out a way in which you could make in-office work meaningful for them, I think is the challenge when it comes to Gen Z specifically, as I think for them, they don't see the same value add that potentially older generations do that worked in an office much longer and have that as a learned skill, see with in-person interaction in the same way. So I think that's a specific generation that I think needs a little bit more value, and I think a different value from the in-office experience that I think we still have not, as a society, quite grappled with or been as direct at addressing.
I mean, I really like the intergenerational thing because we are now living in a world, in our workplace, where we have at least 5 generations, I feel, working together, if not more, in some ways. I have forgotten what's after Gen Z and, more alphabets which have come down the line for sure. I think one of the social experiments which has been done in Sweden about getting a council housing where they have some of the young people and some of the retirees living together in an experiment. And what they found out was that obviously there are skills and values that are useful for each other. So, for instance, for somebody who was new to the line, somebody who was experienced in who knew driving was teaching the younger person driving skills. Somebody who was a retired carpenter was helping a person who was interested in woodwork get into that line. And I think there's a lot of synergies on both AI, and without assuming that one generation is good and the other generation is not good at it, because I have my 84-year-old mother who's constantly on Facebook and YouTube and, who's like really got her earphones on and grooving with the music there and all that. So there is adoption for sure across generations. But I think finding ways as an organization to build these teams together so they see value, and absolutely, Jeff and Garrison, the points that you were making about helping them see value. But sometimes you may have to force fit it in terms of providing opportunities as a team. And we do a lot of these pod working in organizations these days. So can we create pods from people of different generations, different skill sets, so people can work together as a team and leverage of each other for, of course, each other's benefit, and of course, also adding on to organizational benefit. I think there's a lot of social experiments which have been done at a different context that we can take and adopt in organizations and experiment and then scale. So definitely the intergenerational part would be really useful. On the return to work, at least for Hong Kong, it's been almost 100% return to work. But what they've learned from the whole pandemic situation of team A, team B, people coming in, it's now taken for granted that one day of the week people will work from home, will flex it and all that. So there's a bit more openness as against the earlier bit more of the presenteeism culture which was there. So it's really benefited people to go and live a more meaningful life, find ways to manage families, extended families, people that they're giving caregiving. And I think especially for caregivers, this has been really great to have that flexibility. And technology has enabled that in many ways.
One thing I want to add is that this can be very role specific, that, you might ask an engineer what their thought is on return to office, and they may say, I can jump on a huddle, I can get help through a Slack. I don't need, for my learning purposes to be around other people. Whereas I've spoken with sales leaders that want people to learn through osmosis, because the SDRs need to hear from other experienced leaders how to close a deal, how to make that sale, how to, navigate a challenging client situation. So I do think that there's something to be said, outside of generations, more inexperienced workers coming in, learning from more experienced workers. That's not always possible in a remote world, and some things are easier, but I think we have to create ways to do that in both ways. That, we have to create remote ways for doing that in companies where the in-person isn't possible. Some companies don't even have offices now, and we also need to leave that space open that we bring people together for learning and development and other opportunities just for connection.
I think the one thing missing from so many of the conversations on some of these aspects as it relates to hybrid work and AI and digital overload. And I see some of it in the comments as well, as I think like our own inherent bias based on how we entered the workforce / grew / learn, and myself being included, right? Like I learn better by seeing someone do something, particularly like in person. Like you show me how to do this on Excel and I will remember how to do it on Excel. But that's not how everyone learns. And we now know that people learn differently. And I think also, people grow differently as well. And I think one of the challenges that I think we have to kind of come into is like the way that we entered the workforce, the way that we learned on the job, the way that we grew in our career, impacts the way in which we think other people should do the same thing. And I think the truth of the matter is that younger generations have learned entirely differently than older generations have by YouTube, by TikTok, by their cell phones, by computers. And they learned via video games, and like millennials did as well, versus I think learning via a workbook. And I think like just the way in which things have evolved and changed, I think ultimately results in also the way in which eventually the workforce is going to have to change, because doing a in-person training may not be the way in which to educate effectively a younger generation who can learn much faster and more digitally. And I think that's just something that I think we really have to, when thinking about all these things, really be intentional, as I think the value that people get from something, but also the speed to which they can learn, and the way in which they can learn may be very, very different than the way in which we learned or different generations learned. And I think that's still the thing that I see people struggle with, myself included. And I think that's the one thing that to actually address, we need to be able to start getting ahead of that and addressing the bias, and also start investigating how in which people are learning, growing, seeking value, getting value. And honestly, it may also result in cost savings. It may result in time savings, as doing a digital training is much faster and cheaper oftentimes than doing an in-person training is. And so I think that's just something that I think to call out here, that I sometimes see not being addressed, but I think it is something we have to be honest with ourselves of in order to actually address the root, problem or issue.
Thank you so much. That's amazing to hear from all of you. And we are running out of time, but I still do love to cover a couple of more topics with a quick round. And here's one thing that's very interesting to hear for audience as for myself. So what's one digital practice you've seen elevate mental well-being across an organization, and one that secretly drains it? And what would be your piece of advice on that? Also, audience, if you do have any, please drop into the chat and we would definitely look into it.
I think one thing that I've seen we tend to do, and I read this a beautiful analogy in Tim Ferriss's show, where he talks about just like how we sometimes eat a lot of calories which are of no nutritional value, we sometimes consume a lot of knowledge and data and from the wrong sources. So the one digital overload piece which causes a lot of distress is that whole information overload. So we need to move to a more low information diet in a world which is like full of a lot of information, and that applies both at work and outside, be it on Slack, be it meetings, too many meetings, really draining. So one way of elevating it is actually carving out calendar time for meaningful work and blocking calendar blocks, working in calendar blocks. Again, as somebody who needs to, as a solopreneur with no resources to manage my time, and I need to be really on top of it to get so much in. I think calendar blocking is really important for people to get to that low information diet, if you have to call it a diet in these days. And also about focus on looking at learning to say no, getting your balances and boundaries. Every meeting that you're like marked on, every email that you're marked on, and I know there've been a lot of talk about meetings. So I think the positive side of it is one of the banks, DBS, Development Bank of Singapore, based out of Singapore, does this. They've created the meeting strategy called Mojo, where they have a meeting owner and a joyful observer, MO and JO. So they manage to ensure that the meetings are observed in a certain way. They take feedback about it and they run it. And I think this is some practice which can be very easily adopted in most organizations to ensure that you have an agenda and meetings are run better. And that will really elevate.
Adding to Sundari's point, I feel like in the past, multitasking was celebrated. It was it was a skill we wanted people to have. It was something that we thought was great in terms of productivity. I recently read a stat that it takes us 23 minutes to refocus after an interruption. So now imagine with all of your tabs open, the Slacks coming in, the email that you see as you're looking for something in a tab, all of those are actually taking away from our productivity. So I think this is something that we should try to avoid doing. And like Sundari said, like put those blocks in, set the boundaries, declutter your workspace. I think that's a big one that I'm notorious for having 30 to 50 tabs open in multiple windows. And it's scary when you look at my laptop, but I've actually started making it a point to delete the screenshots off my desktop, clear out my downloads folder, move those tabs and close them when I don't need them. Moving work to different tabs also helps you focus on, say, I'm working on a presentation for couple of hours. I can do that without seeing emails popping up in another tab. So I think we have to be very mindful of our own use and our own productivity in how to set some of those boundaries for ourselves as well. And maybe not celebrate some of the behaviors that are actually working against us than for us when we're trying to be more productive and reduce the burnout and reduce those extra hours and, context switching all day long.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would say to avoid is I think this is an active thing that I think you have to do every day, but I think just the speed to which we work results in feeling like you need to keep that velocity and or speed it up, right? And I think with Slack messages particularly, it's like the minute you get one, you feel the need, no matter what your company says, no matter what anyone tells you, you feel the need to respond immediately because it is a instant message and you feel like, oh, I need to immediately collaborate on this thing. And I think that is resulting exactly with what Sharon's saying too, of, kind of constantly adding, constant distractions and impacting productivity. And so I think really working to dismantle the feeling of needing to immediately respond and engage and kind of creating spaces for yourself to be able to step away, come back and be more thoughtful in your response or, respond when you actually have time. As so often the person that's sending you the message is not expecting an immediate response either, but they get one because it is a message and then that reinforces the behavior. And I think secondary to that in terms of what you should add to, I think is really being intentional about when do we want this delivered by? When are we expecting to roll out this process or policy? So often saying no is scary because you feel like you may not have the power or the ability to say no. But being able to ask for context around like, hey, this meeting that we're having, what is the output of this? When are we expecting to roll this thing out? When are we expecting to make a decision here? So that way you kind of understand, okay, in my week, in my month, when is this actually hitting? So that it doesn't feel like, oh, this meeting we had today, I now immediately need to go do this work. I now immediately need to roll this out and everything is like right now urgent. And so I think asking for that context and being able to then map out your day, week, month, quarter, I think can help kind of alleviate the feeling that if you don't ask, the assumption will be that it is immediate because so much of our life today is immediate. And so I think those would be some of the things that come to my mind.
And I agree with all of you. I would just add that for your employees, look into a tool they're relatively low cost, things like Headspace or Lyra Health, where your employees can gain access to mental health tools 24 hours a day that can help them when they need it to help further support everything that we've already talked about. If they do get in a space where they need some assistance, then it's available to them. So I would encourage you to look at some of those tools that are out there. And no, none of them pay me to say that. Those are just two that I've looked at that look really good. And on the matter of work and kind of disconnecting, our leadership team holds each other accountable for that and encouraging the rest of the teams to disconnect at night. They need that time to recharge, be with their families, their pets. And so because it comes down from our CEO and all of us as leaders reiterate it to our teams, you don't walk in the morning with 500 emails that you feel stressed about. You walk in and everybody's kind of jumping in. Yes, it gets busy during the day, but then we turn it all off again at night.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you all. So we would love to close it up by just asking one quick piece of advice of what would you give to our audience to help them manage the digital life and your mental health? Yeah, we will wrap it up with a quick check-in, and yes, who would love to go first?
I'll kick us off. I think it's asking for help. If you're struggling with something, chances are someone else is too. So if you can't wrap your head around a new piece of technology that you're being asked to use, or you're struggling with hybrid work in some way, talk to your manager, talk to your team, brainstorm ideas together. You're not in this alone, nor do you have to suffer through it alone. So be vocal about your needs, and leverage all of the free resources that are out there. There's tons and tons of tools, learning at your fingertips to help you get comfortable and help you adapt, and help you manage your own time as much as you need to.
I want to leave a tool for actually organizations and folks to do, which will help people. So there's a framework called US Surgeon General's Framework, which looks at mental health and well-being in organizations. So I have friends here in Hong Kong who are working on adding a level to it. So that framework talks about protection from harm, connection and community, work-life harmony, mattering at work, and opportunity for growth. It looks at different aspects of an employee's life cycle. So I think in today's world on AI and digital overload, we need to add another one on how are we coping with emerging technologies. And if we can do an assessment and measurement for each of us in organization, that would be a good addition to the framework. And that's something maybe HR heads who are in the call can really take up and look at it. And that'd be a useful tool to know. How are we progressing as an organization? How are we providing that space for people to flourish and grow?
I would say, I think really take a moment to think about like where the uncertainty that you may be feeling and where you're feeling uncertain is coming from. And then I think working to address that. So if it's about AI and the use case and kind of the security around your job, like work to actually digest and investigate how to solve that problem. If it's hybrid work and how to make the most of your schedule and time management, work to address that. So I think so often we just feel uncertain and we get so overwhelmed by that we try to address it in a myriad of ways without kind of solving the root cause. And so I think really lean into what is causing that uncertainty right this moment, and then make digestible, tangible steps that can actually improve tomorrow that exact thing that is making you uncertain. If it's AI, log on to ChatGPT and use it 3 times today. If it's, hybrid work, next time you're in the office, make one goal that you want for that day that you're in the office. I think that makes it a lot more tangible and a lot more addressable.
And just real quickly, since I know we're low on time, use data to figure out what your teams actually need. So whether, and you can use focus groups, surveys, AI tools, whatever it takes, find out what resources and support they need and try to personalize that to them, I think is what I would recommend.
Thank you all. It's amazing to be a part of this panel, and this panel is really gold. To all our panelists, thank you so much for bringing your honesty and openness, humor, and the heart to the space. I think our audience loved you all. There's been flooding a lot of comments. I hope you address it all. And to our audience, thank you all for showing up, for sharing in the chat, and being part of this collective reset we are trying to do. And please stay still. One more panel ahead, and do stretch, hydrate, and breathe, and we'll see you all around. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'd like to welcome you to the Hacking HR Workplace Wellbeing and Mental Health Summit. A big thank you to our audience, who I know is joining us from around the globe. We're delighted to have you with us for what I am pretty sure is going to be a amazing panel discussion on measuring what matters, right? Tracking and evaluating workplace well-being initiatives and the impact that it has on organizations. I'd like to invite the panel to come in. Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. So I'd like to welcome our panel of distinguished experts in all things people and talent. Hello and welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'd like to start with having each of you, we'll just go around clockwise and share a brief intro and where you're joining us from and what attracted you to join this panel.
Great. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sherry Race. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Enthea, and I'm joining this because for the past 6 years, my whole life has really been about finding mental health solutions that work. I'm very frustrated with the system where people are left suffering in silence. And I want to spread the word and talk to HR leaders about solutions that are out there, that are effective, that don't leave people suffering, that don't just act like Band-Aids, just requires some innovation and some thinking outside the box, but there are ways people can get better, and hopefully that's what we'll talk about today.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maria Alberto. I'm an international HR leader. I'm based in London, and I'm here because throughout my career, I've been always focused on creating the great experiences within the workplace. And definitely this topic is close to my heart, and I'm here to share what I've learned and also to learn with all the panelists.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael Goldberg. I'm a board member, a counselor, a company providing 24/7 text-based mental health support to the traditionally unreachable people. I have a leadership and culture enhancement consulting company that is deeply rooted in the over 2 decades that I spent in healthcare leadership, ultimately being the CEO of the second largest hospital in New York, leading a team of over 12,000 people, and seeing firsthand the enhancements that strong leadership can make in employee mental health well-being, wellness, well-being, and of course, all of the effects of the last several years in how we can support our employee workforce in a better way. So pleasure to be here.
Great. Welcome, Michael. Amanda?
Hi there. I'm Amanda Reed, and I'm actually calling in from Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky. I work for Gainesway Management Corporation, and really, I've been attending the entire mental health summit. I think it's extremely important that companies now, I think, especially with COVID, are being more proactive and implementing preventative measures. So really excited to be here and join everybody.
Welcome.
Am I the last to speak?
Yes, you're the last. We're having trouble hearing you.
And hi, everyone. Okay, my name is Brooks, and as an HR leader, I've seen firsthand, how workplace well-being is not just about policy; it's about promise. And pretty much it's about recognizing that behind every metric, every KPI, every business goal, there are real people with real lives. I think it was Michael that mentioned 12,000 people. For every number, there are people with brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, and real lives. My mission is to ensure that we continue to create workplaces, that employees are not just surviving, but they're thriving. And mental health, which I have been through, I've had a personal journey myself, is prioritized. And the fact that managers themselves are equipped, to support their teams. In the end, it's about building sustainable organizations, but you're going to be measuring what truly matters, which is your people. Thank you for having me.
Great. Welcome, Ruth. Okay, so we have limited time, and we're starting a little bit later than planned, so I'm going to jump right in if you all don't mind. The topic of our panel discussion is measure what matters, right? And understanding what we should be measuring. And I don't know if everyone's read this book, Measure What Matters, but if you haven't, please do. It's amazing. And I'll put a link into it. But I keep it on my desk because I even need to be reminded sometimes that measuring what is going to make impact on decisions and the way companies grow is really how we should be approaching this. And especially for people teams, we have a lot of soft, squishy stuff that we measure that is hard to put numbers around, right? It's very difficult to put metrics around some of the stuff we do. So given that, I want to start right in. I'm going to kind of roll around and ask specific questions of individuals, and then we'll move into questions for the whole panel to jump in. Maria, are you ready? What role do you think mid-level managers and people leaders play in measuring and assessing the workplace well-being and, let's call it, vibe of organizations?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I believe that people leaders or line managers, mid-level managers have an important role in the organizations because they are on the ground. They are the ones who connect people. They are the ones who engage, who motivate. They are close to the teams. And I think this in particular well-being, using that proximity and that the relationship they build over time, it facilitates having the information and assessing how their team members are doing on a regular basis. So I think it's a key element in the well-being assessment, if you want. And I think that the organization and the leadership of the organizations need to support these leaders to play this role. So sometimes they are not ready, sometimes they are not trained, they are not prepared, they don't have time. And I think organization needs to be aware of their key role and either train them and give time so they can assess their team's well-being.
Great, thank you. Okay, Michael, given your background, and I just kind of threw this in, given how I'm meeting you, you've come from big organizations, right? And things are different, as we all know, big, small, medium size, right? How do you think organizations can shift from that pure performance driven, which is very kind of big company philosophy, right, to one that prioritizes more that well-being, mental health, without sacrificing productivity too much?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll start with whose productivity. That's the first part, right? Because the best performing and supported organizations actually have the strongest productivity and they have the best output. And data and research suggests that companies where employees are valued have something like a 21% higher margin than companies with worse performing employees or less satisfied employees. And so in some ways, surprisingly, larger organizations are actually easier, I think, to navigate through supporting team members than smaller organizations where there are less people and more of the work is focused on them specifically. The biggest thing that I think would be impactful for leadership in organizations is to, one, recognize that the output, that the thing that they measure and value probably the most in their organizations, despite all the different competing priorities they talk about, is that their margin, their profit is going to improve the more they support their team members, which will require investment in two ways. One, programs and services that team members will actually use to support their well-being. But then the second thing is to get out of the boardroom and to get out of the corner offices and to get into the places where their team members are so that they can, one, build relationships with them and two, experience their companies from the point of view of their people. Because I can assure you that when they do, the decisions that they make in the boardrooms will be completely different than the ones that they're making today.
Yeah, I agree with very much with get out of your office and walk the floor, meet your people, right? Understand what they do. It's something that I've done for 25 years, and sometimes I get strange looks, but it's always appreciated at the end, to the point where people will come to me and say, "We haven't seen you this morning. How are you?" Right? So.
And what's critical about that is to not use those as opportunities to be punitive, and to use them as gotcha moments to see when people are doing things wrong and reprimand them, but more to almost let those pass by and recognize and reward and celebrate the things that they're doing well in those moments. Because otherwise you're going to invalidate all the trust that you're trying to build by being out there.
Exactly. And it is trust. I mean, that's exactly what it builds, right? Understanding what our people are doing, because we don't know everything. We can't, nor should we. Building that trust and that rapport is so important. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to move on. Sherry, given your background, how do you think I'll call them up and coming mental health innovations, in particular, psychedelics, different alternative therapy for organizations, and how do we accept those? How do we educate that they're not recreational, they're actually have an impact, right? That's their stigma, right? How do we get past that stigma, and how do we teach our leaders and our executive teams to understand that?
Great question. I think first we need to acknowledge the truth, which is that traditional mental health treatments are not reaching everyone. In fact, they're not helping most people. Up to 60% of people who have a mental health diagnosis are actually treatment resistant. So traditional methods won't work for them. Many people, like someone on your team, maybe a family member, maybe a friend, are suffering in silence despite having access to therapy and medication. And if you just now do the mental exercise of thinking about someone you care about who's been suffering from depression or anxiety, it's very rare that they'll say, yeah, I took that SSRI and it cured me. And so I think we break the stigma by really recognizing and acknowledging that we have a broken system where we have all of these options that work for very few people, and most people are still suffering. And then we start paying attention to the science. And the science and the data tells us from top tier universities like Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, that innovative treatments like ketamine assisted therapy and psychedelic assisted therapy honestly offer new hope. They are on average 4 times more effective than antidepressants. They are not chemically addictive. They are safe. You can't overdose from them. And unlike anything else that's out there, they get to the root cause of trauma and depression. And so it's not something you take for the rest of your life. Like, I know friends who are on antidepressants for 10, 15 years. I have friends in therapy for 10 or 15 years. And ketamine assisted therapy and psychedelic assisted therapy is something you do only a few times. And most people a year later no longer have depression, no longer have anxiety. And so when we start appreciating the reality of the situation and what's not working and what science has showed us does work, I think we can break the stigma. And I think that's why, now what used to be niche when I started this company 5 years ago is now talked about on Joe Rogan and on Fox News and on CNN and on Netflix. So I think we are doing a good job of breaking the stigma by focusing on data.
Yeah, and sharing that data, right, widely, and educating on it, But I agree with you on the ketamine therapy. I have friends that do it, and the goal is not for you to be on it forever. SSRIs are typically, it's a life sentence, right? Like you stop and then it comes back, and the whole goal of these alternatives is for it to be a short amount of time and to move on, right, and
exactly.
Give you your life.
real healing and getting to the root cause should be the goal.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Sherry. Amanda, what do you think are the main challenges and what tools potentially can help equip our leadership teams, we'll say that, executive teams, to accept these types of alternative and I'm going to throw in neurodiversity as well. I just had a conversation with a CEO that I coached the other day about how, recruiting needs to include some type of neurodiversity. And it was like deer in headlights. Like, what? What is it? Right? What do you think? How do we approach this?
Yeah, I think great question. I love neurodiversity. I love the self-help books. The books are available. Actually, I have them available for employees to come and check them out. I'm big into the coaching aspect, so I feel like normalizing that mental health is something that's very important. Like I said earlier, I feel like up until the last few years, it hasn't been pushed as much in organizations and companies as it should have been. And so with that, terrible pandemic, but it pushed us on to actually wanting to train our management and train our leaders to recognize mental health like symptoms, also provide them with resources, make sure everybody's aware of the EAP, offering like well-being initiatives, different things, physical and mental, gym memberships, things of that nature. So I think by pushing that and getting that out to your leadership team, your executive leadership team, and letting them know, hey, culture kind of starts from the top down. So we need to support this. Mental health is a real challenge, and it's serious, and we need to take it seriously.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Amanda. Books. What role have you seen the mental health vendors, and there's lots of them out there, play in supporting HR teams internally to influence leadership teams to adopt and accept it, welcome, and then it can actually get behind initiatives around mental health?
And thank you, Lisa. In the organizations I've worked in, the likes of Barry Callebaut, where I managed about 6,000 employees, or GSK, where we lived for about 26 countries, or you consider Reckitt Benckiser, which I'll call for self-Reckitt. A few things you would find is the intersection of HR as well as the vendors. There are many vendors out there, like you've rightly mentioned. And if we look at the stats, burnout itself, cost about 322 billion US dollars, according to the WHO, annually. So it's not a personal issue; it's a global economic crisis. And so you will have, various touch points at which, there are different organizations that could provide support. The other sits around, the Gallup poll that talks about the 70% of variance, in employee engagement. And I think one of us mentioned it here, today. The well-being of the team hinges on the quality of the leaders, as well as the companies, themselves. I think it was Michael that alluded to the profitability of organizations. So when you talk about vendors, you want to look at, the role of the fact that they provide a value proposition. And one of it is scalability. As you look at large organizations, you will find more organizations that are able to provide employee assistance programs, to their employees. The other is the fact that because they deal with this on a regular basis, they have the expertise. And they're also able to provide, insights, from a data point of view. However, I think where there needs to be a bit more light, and where more vendors, need to work on will be around, the personalization. I think the last session was around AI, and the impact of digital, to mental health. So where you now have AI matching, AI matching, to therapists, and then dealing with employee needs, because sometimes they don't want to talk to HR. The other could be, digital platforms, where you have apps and they're 24/7 support. The other will be, how are we tracking the return on investments? Is it reducing the cost of healthcare? Is it improving employee engagement scores? So in the long run, if focus will be around how else you look at collaboration. As you look at the metrics and you're agreeing on the KPIs between your vendors, you're also co-designing, the programs, that you would work on so that the content is culturally adaptable. A few days ago, I said what works in Cairo might not necessarily work in London, but it's important that we have the right feedback loops, either through the employees as well as, the vendors themselves, so that HR can provide the right solutions to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boots. Okay, so I'm going to open these questions up to the team. Raise, go off mute. I'll be looking if you want to jump in, but I kind of open this up for everybody, right? So how do you guys feel about peer-to-peer support networks, ERPs, etc., or ERGs, excuse me? How do you think they contribute to a culture of well-being and support transparency and openness around mental health, and make that conversation okay to have, and to give employees and teams that psychological safety to talk about it?
I'm happy to start, and I'm sure someone else can add more. I'll be short and sweet. Yeah, I think that it's really important to feel like you're not alone, and so that's a big part of healing. And these peer groups and ERGs can create that space where someone says "me too," which lifts the weight a little. And then when those groups are paired with access to meaningful care, it sort of becomes like a bridge to healing. So I think they're part of the solution, an important part of the solution, but not a standalone solution in itself. So that's not the only thing that we should offer, but it's an important piece of the puzzle. But I'm curious what our co-panelists.
Maria.
Yes, building on that, I believe that both peers network and employee resource group are spaces that allow people to talk about when they trust, and they allow them to talk about interests and concerns. And talking about these type of concerns or issues normalize them. So it gets easier, people feel more comfortable in sharing and somehow healing. So I agree that these two groups are very important to support or to support these type of issues.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, if I could add, I think those are both correct. I think what couples an employee resource group to be more successful than a traditional group would be leadership's acceptance to listening to representatives from the employee resource group, so that there might be some microaggressions that the employees are experiencing throughout their organization that the leaders are unaware of. And if you're going to have a resource group available, first is being able to support it with the fact that you're going to make changes to the culture of your organization based off of feedback that comes from the group. But the other thing that I think is important to note, and I think this goes also to, EAPs was mentioned a couple of times earlier, that goes into the lack of people who participate both in employee resource groups and EAPs, is the fear or the hurdle of speaking up visually or face to face, or even being acknowledged to acknowledge where their concerns lie. The average person who has a mental health concern waits 11 years before seeking help, before they get over, put the stigma aside, before they get comfortable enough or the problem gets bad enough to go and receive the help and support that they need. And that's true too with resource groups, employee resource groups. And so I think companies that are able to get past that barrier for access to care will see the best outcomes for their team members.
No, I agree with you on that, because I think that so many organizations, the ERGs just stand, nobody collects the information, the data, right? And then they don't actually action on it, right? And I think that follow through is super important for organizations, in particular with mental health, so that we're socializing what people are talking about, right? What our people are talking about, what they're feeling, right? About these sensitive topics. Thank you, Michael. Amanda, want to jump in?
Yeah, well, I agree with everyone else. I kind of, but just normalizing it in the workplace, so everybody is aware that we have these resources and feel free to join. Like there's trying to eliminate that stigma that has been associated with mental health and mental health issues is super important. But yeah, I agree with what everyone else said. Definitely.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump into measurement. Okay, how do you all feel organizations can best measure the return of investment, which for organizations and executives is important, of well-being initiatives, programs, platforms, all of that, to justify that long-term investment? And I use the word long-term because I have a CEO currently that told me that he was going to rip out their mental health program this month. I said, oh, no, you're not doing that. That would be very bad. But I had to educate them, and I had to talk like that. Why? Because they only see numbers, right? And how do we, as people leaders and people teams, how do we measure it? What do we measure? And then how do we effectively communicate it and advocate for it? Who wants to jump in?
I can jump in.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, of course. I think there are a few ways to measure it. One I mentioned earlier, which is profitability of the company, right? And so that's one thing which I think the competing priority for decision makers and organizations is the number of initiatives that get after the same metric that everybody is trying to improve, and knowing which one of the initiatives that they undertook are the ones that are making the biggest impact. So the way I think about it, especially in terms of people metrics, is what does your retention look like? Are the people that you want to keep staying with you? What is your absenteeism looking like? Your presenteeism? Are people calling out a lot? That's a clear indication of stress and burnout and lack of support. And how easy is it to recruit? What are people talking about your company about online? And are you the place that everybody is trying to be employed? If you look at the metrics across the United States, 20% of people have left their jobs in the last couple of years. That's 1 in 5 people. Well, where did they go? Right? They seemingly went to a place that they thought they were going to have a better experience and be more well supported by that company. And so we all know that recruiting, onboarding, orientation, that all takes time, energy, and money, and that could all be tracked within the companies as well. And so having a great culture, a strong culture in an organization improves every single one of those metrics. Not to mention, I come from a world of healthcare. It's not just about profitability. The more people are engaged, the safer the care is that the people are receiving that are getting that care.
I like that point, Michael, the safety part. That's so important. And that was one of the things that I talked about, is that we need to provide that, right, for our employees. Yeah. Thank you for that. Maria.
Yes, I was going to add that it's also about the savings. A healthy workforce goes on sickness less days, has less health costs. So if companies assess these savings after implementing or launching these well-being programs, definitely these will be good metrics, a good way to assess the impact of the well-being programs.
Thank you. Sherry.
Yeah, I don't know if I have much more to add. I agree with everything that's been said. Obviously, the the biggest one would be to see over time, is there a decrease for self-funded employers? Is there a decrease in healthcare costs? We want to also look at clinical outcomes like the PHQ-9, the GAD-7 to see, are people getting less depressed? Are they getting less anxious? Look for, employee testimonials or stories that they're sharing. And then perhaps even like manager reported. Like managers might report like, oh, there's better collaboration with my team. There's better energy with my team. So these sort of less tangible shifts might be a result of taking care of employee well-being.
Yeah, I like that, Sherry, that going directly to the managers. I like that. Oops,
yeah, if I may, Lisa,
yes,
there is
absolutely.
something here, and it's interesting to hone it all in. I think Michael mentioned it, Maria mentioned it, Sherry mentioned it, but you also touched on it. When you talked about a CEO that would want to, would I say, cut off the budget, for wellness and well-being. But one thing we need to constantly remind them of is that the solution, or the solutions we intend to provide, is not a solution from HR. It is actually a solution for the business. And it is definitely long term. It is long term. You cannot fix a mental health problem, the very first year that you got it. A few of our colleagues have already highlighted, the kind of metrics we should be measuring. Of course, engagement, absenteeism. But I would point out to one thing very clearly: the lives and the impact of the lives that you touch. Someone, many years ago reached out to me. His mother died, and he naturally wouldn't talk to HR. They won't want to talk to HR, with things like this. But helping him, find an employee assistance program that he could connect with, that could help him through that journey, really made, a significant impact in his life. And he came back 2 years after. And I'm alluding to this because of the longevity as to what we're talking about. He came back 2 years after, to literally say thank you. You saved me at that time. So again, the stories we tell is not really our stories, but it's the stories of the employees that choose to stay with the organizations that we work in, because we provide the right solutions at the nick of time. Thank you.
Yes, I agree with you. And that's a whole nother topic that I could talk about for hours is, storytelling. And that, it's, as people leaders and HRBPs, it's, I see it very much as part of our role to make sure that we are talking to our people, right? And not just our people on our team, but across the organization, right? And I have one-on-ones with everyone in my company because for that exact reason, I want to understand more and beyond what their one-on-one is with their managers. And it gives me a very different lens on what's going on, right? How are people feeling, right? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Where do we need to potentially, invest? And I think that our plates are so overflowing and so full that we're not doing that as much, right? And like I said, that's a whole nother topic that we can talk about another time. But I agree with you 100%. Is talk to your people, and then share your stories, right? Because that's impactful, right? It's a little more squishy, but it is very impactful. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes. I want to give everyone kind of a final question, and take a minute or so. This doesn't need to be rushed. But with our audience, I'd love to have you each share, 1 or 2 suggestions on how you feel organizations can hold their leadership accountable for fostering that psychologically safe workplace. Let's start with Sherry.
Thanks. That is a really great question. I think creating a culture where it becomes normal to talk about these things, setting the example. We've seen in companies that are offering ketamine-assisted therapy right now, where we've seen the greatest amount of success and results have been companies where at the highest levels of leadership, even at the CEO level, there is open talk and discussions about mental health. This is not something to be shy about or shunned or embarrassed about. It's something that even leadership is embracing and talking about. And I will say, and maybe not everyone will agree with this one, but I think especially as we're working with a lot of blue collar industries and construction, plumbers, building trades, electricians, making it safe for men to talk about their struggles openly is a really important piece of the equation that also gets overlooked. And there's probably a lot to like dive into there, but we don't have a lot of time and I want to let others talk. But in short, creating a culture where it's safe for everyone and all genders to talk about this. But because I work a lot with blue collar industries, I think making it safe for men to talk about their pain and their struggles.
Yeah. Thank you, Sherry. Maria?
Yeah, I was thinking that one way to make leadership more accountable could be, for instance, including a KPI related to this in their performance evaluation, their annual, where the team will assess and evaluate how open they speak about this, how open this topic is managed. So my suggestion would be this one. I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. Michael?
I think very similar to Maria's suggestion around some sort of a KPI, right? I think about, as I mentioned before, all the tools that are available for companies to implement for their employees. The question that I've always asked is, well, how well utilized is it? And again, I'll just throw out the EAP number because I know it. Typically, people in organizations utilize EAPs about 3% of the time. And we know from the opening statements before from you, Lisa, there's something much more significant, like 40% of the people at least who are suffering in silence in their organization. And so there's a big gap there between the average number of people that we know are suffering and the number of people who are getting help, at least through their organization. And Books mentioned, one of the biggest reasons why, and that's trust about talking about it within their organization. So I think having leaders who are held accountable to the decisions that they've made for the systems that they're using to support their teams to have higher utilization. So if EAP isn't doing it, what is a solution that removes the barriers that will get multiples on top of that for people to actually utilize in the manner in which they will utilize it during the time that they will utilize it, and then make that, again, go to Maria's point, part of their compensation, so that they are incentivized to ensure that people are speaking to people for help, whether it's an employee resource group or some other available organization to work with. I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I'm actually going to steal that. Because we do. I mean, I need to be held accountable. I'm an executive. I need that, right? And you tie my bonus something to it. The incentive is a little different, right? I hate that it needs to be, but I agree with you. Amanda.
Yeah, I agree with Eddie so far, and Michael especially. That's kind of what I had thought myself, as making those managers and leaders accountable and tying it to something that it's expected. It's an expectation, and also doing that, but then also focusing on the prevention, being proactive, training your managers and leaders so you can hold them accountable. So providing them with the tools to actually do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Books.
Thank you. I think all my colleagues have said everything. Maybe I would just highlight it as pillars. One of it is awareness. Sometimes they just don't know. Managers don't know, and you have to create the opportunity to allow them to become self-aware at least elevate their thinking in one way or the other. So that's the first thing. And Michael, thank you. Yes, absolutely. Is that building that trust, in one shape and form. And that will come from you training them. I think Amanda mentioned it. Maria also addressed that. But the other part would be you measuring, and if you don't measure, you would not know how well you're doing, in that space. And the way to measure is we have talked about it, include it in the KPIs, for leaders. We know definitely that if you measure it and you track it, you can reward and embed, those behaviors that you want. But the other part is, which is something we need to address at some point, is how do we look at the consequences for toxic behavior? Because when you talk about psychological safety, you also have to look at the other part of it, which is the fact that they do not have it. And what creates that is the toxicity in the workplace. So measuring, so providing the consequences, for that should also be something to be looked at. It takes some bravery, but it can be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Books. I'm going to add on to that, the bravery and the importance for it to be okay to be vulnerable, right? And then in my coaching of executives, it's something that I work on a lot, because that is hard for them to be able to be vulnerable and to share their stories around these things. So I would say, vulnerability is important in encouraging a culture where that's okay. And then I'm going to go back to the measuring, Michael, that you had mentioned, and that I think, continuously measuring what's working and what's not and where adoption is super important. If you have low adoption in something, pull back, find out why, right? Don't add another tool on top of it potentially, because then you've got tool sprawl and nobody loves that, right? And maybe replace it, right? But find out why it's not working and where their gap is, what's missing, right? And replace it. Don't keep adding more things on top of it, because that confuses people. They don't know where to go for what. So thank you all so much. I think we could talk for hours. Thank you to our audience for joining us. You're all amazing. You made my job super simple. And I look forward to doing panels with you all in the future.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.